Two beautiful girls are tied up in a cart. The menacing man on the cart and the other men nearby are silent. The first girl asks what's going on. The second girl replies that she doesn't know. Sarah says your breasts are showing, to which she shyly agrees. Suddenly, the man announces the appearance of a dragon. The dragon asks if they feel sorry for him. Another voice asks if they feel sorry for them. The manga review is about to begin. Enjoy! A training fight in the courtyard. Voices are heard. The old man says that if Ryouma can kill him, he will give him everything, and baits Ryouma to attack him. Ryouma says it sounds pretty tempting. He explains that he and his opponent are warriors called to protect the temple. The old man explains that their job is to guard the sacred place from evil spirits and enemies. Ryouma turns sharply and looks forward. The man expresses surprise. Ryouma announces that he is ready to fight. The man watches Ryuma's movements with a tense expression as he delivers a swift blow. The man reports that Ryouma tried to hit him in the throat in earnest and calls him a prankster. Ryouma explains that the master taught him to spare no one in a serious fight, even the opponent's parents. The old man explains that his techniques always strike with one blow and that, of course, it follows. The woman shouted that breakfast was getting cold and asked to hurry up. She said the two were supposed to have fun every morning and were both losing track of time. The man with black hair said he couldn't believe anyone was having fun with this old man and asked him not to joke. Ryouma says they're killing each other. The girl asks him to stop joking. Ryouma says, well, a man approaches a girl named Asuka and asks if she's having fun pretending to be a married couple. Asuka asks him to stop, explaining that she doesn't have that kind of relationship with him. The man says she keeps saying that, but she makes them breakfast every day. The girl announces that she'll go to school first. Ryouma tells the old man not to get cocky, and he replies not to underestimate him. The girl looks ahead in surprise. Ryouma apologizes and says he has no intention of joining the karate club, and the girl reacts with interest. The woman says they'll always be glad to see Ryouma and can wait for him to think things over. The boy reports that Mikoshiba is attracting the scouts' attention again. The old man explains that sword exchanges should only be conducted with the intent to kill the opponent, as all his techniques are designed for one fatality. Ryouma says that today, as usual, it's also Kiaraben, and says that Asuka keeps doing unnecessary things. He explains that he doesn't like eating alone. As they walk down the stairs, Ryouma mentions the club. Sitting on the floor, he explains that joining the club is impossible. The knight reports that the summoning was successful today and addresses Gaetsu-sama. Another knight says the summoned one is in good physical condition, but you can't judge a book by its cover. The hooded man says that's true too and asks for the curse to be cast on him to hurry. Ryouma asks what's going on, notes that this doesn't look like a school, and expresses strong killing intent, deciding to try and catch him off guard. The masked man warns him not to show any signs of. He offers to eat together and explains that it's kairabento. The man with the helmet is surprised. Then he strikes with his hand. Ryouma says he's going to kill the enemy now. He then takes his sword and strikes. He rushes forward and grabs the gun. He reports that he missed. Ryouma strikes the armored man with his sword, causing him to fall with a loud thud. Ryouma then strikes him with his fist. He says it's not good and asks if it's thunder. The armored warrior asks for the spirit of thunder and the spirit of wind. The armored warrior curses. The hooded man orders everyone to gather before him. The warrior screams for death. Ryouma looks forward. The man with the staff explains to listen to his request and crush the enemy by casting the lightning discharge spell. The man screams that he must die in front of him. He notices that the man was using his subordinate as a shield. The man reports that his right lung is damaged. Ryouma asks the old man where he is. The old man explains that it's the west of the central continent, the royal palace of the Altomia Empire. Ryouma confirms that it's the Altomia Empire and wonders why he's here. The old man replies that it's because he summoned him. The man is. He says he can return to his former world. The man notices a warlike, murderous mood and asks what it is. The man muses that if he can control it, then conquering the central continent will no longer be a dream. The man wonders what to do next. The man says he just needs to buy time until the guards notice something is wrong, and considers saying he can do it, but is afraid they'll force him to go back. The man explains that if he tells the truth, he'll be killed, and he, like Ultom's brain. The man says that according to his knowledge, there's no way, and he's been exposed. Ryouma says his lungs are recovering, and if he can somehow distract the enemy, he might be able to kill them. Ryouma explains that you can summon someone, but you can't send them back. The man says that's. The man asks why he was called here. He explains that it is because people who come from another world have a high capacity for absorption. Ryouma explains that in this world, when you kill someone, you absorb their power. The man is surprised and says something like, "What?" The man asks the thunder spirit for help and tries to strike. He says he was summoned to another world and adds that it's good that this can't be called self-defense on Earth. The man explains what this means. The girl reports that 2 hours have passed since the ceremony began, and something has definitely happened to the grandfather. The man explains that the laws forbid anyone from interfering with the process, and summoning people from another world is the secret of all secret techniques. The man adds that. The man asks Suryodano to calm down, and the girl says that she cannot calm down if Grandpa-sama fails even once. The man asks her to calm down and explains that he knows he's related to Gai Sudano and understands her concerns. The woman explains that even high-level mages make mistakes. The woman apologizes to Rolf-sama for showing something unsightly, and the man says he's the one. The guy tells you to accept protection and fulfill the request. Then he casts a fire explosion spell. Ryouma says the door itself isn't enough to move it, and says using fire against a steel door is unbelievable. He explains that the door freezes. The boy reports that the steel door has been destroyed. The man explains that the door was destroyed by a sudden change in temperature. First heating, then freezing. The girl orders the men to move forward and tells Rolf that they need to hurry and get inside. The girl says we need to watch. The man is silent. The man says what it is. The boy says Gaisu-sama is here, addressing Rolf-sama. The girl says grandfather and denies it. The man says everything is fine and they will save him. The text explains that the story is about a man from another world who meets 2 servants, and about a great hero beginning his journey to become the supreme ruler of the Western Central Continent, where swords and magic reign supreme. The girl says she can't figure out what kind of creature could have killed her grandfather, the head of the royal mages, and where it disappeared to. She then reports that, according to the autopsy results, all the men were killed with bare hands. The scarred man says it's impossible to believe all those fully armed soldiers and Gaitsudano were killed by someone using only their bare hands. The cloaked man confirms this. The soldier explains that they found finger-shaped bruises and several skulls with the backs of their heads crushed. The knight states that the matter is urgent and turns to Rolf. Rolf asks what's wrong. The knight explains that something is wrong with the infirmary. Rolf reflects that the new summoned person must be weak at first and that they shouldn't be considered a monster. The girl says that it will be possible to. The scene depicts a massive fire inside the building. The fire engulfs the room and spreads throughout the entire area. A guy yells fire. A man says something is burning. Another man asks someone to bring water, and the guy orders a magician to be called immediately. The guy says he's summoning an eternal water spirit and asking to transform into a dragon. The man casts the water storm spell. In the top left, Ryouma says he just stopped a fire and says it can be seen just by looking at it, to which the girl replies that's true, but in the top right, the girl demands Ryouma explain what exactly happened and calls him by name, and he explains that he doesn't know how to explain it. Imperial Dr. Ronbelt reports that the soldier has arrived at the infirmary and asks about Ronbelt. The man explains that he is dangerous and that Aaron was also killed. The woman speaks to Suryai-sama. The boy says the doctor will take care of the victim now and asks him to hold on. He also tries to convince the victim not to fall asleep. Otherwise he won't wake up. The boy shouts at the doctor that it's an emergency and asks for the door to be opened. The doctor says the door is open. The old man informs Aaron that it's an emergency and leaves everything in his hands. The bespectacled man says everything will be fine now and asks him to remove his armor first. He notices his father and asks him to wait a minute. The armored warrior says he's been drinking again and has nothing to say about him. The guy says, oh. In amazement, the man in the helmet remains silent. The guy turns around sharply and looks at the fallen man in surprise. A guy calls out to someone, asking if anyone is there. Ryouma grabs the guy and throws him to the floor. The guy is breathing heavily. The guy asks to be let go, and he says he wants to ask a question first. The guy asks who he is and what he wants. He explains how he can get out of here. The guy asks why he killed them. Ryouma apologizes and asks for an answer to his question. The man explains that to get out of here you need to take the right path, go through the garden, and see the gate. Ryouma confirms that you need to take the right path, go through the garden, and find the gate. The man tells her to keep going. Ryouma apologizes and the man, he says that now is a critical moment. He says that the time has come to act. The man says that the guy must have used fire to escape, and if they want to catch him, they need to hurry. The guy asks Syria what's going on and what Ronbelt-san is talking about. Syria orders Orlando to begin casting the spell. Orlando is surprised and Syria says. The man tells Orlando that he should listen to Syria. The girl asks Orlando to use everything he has, as the enemy is very dangerous, and explains that he is even allowed to use teleportation. Orlando asks what the limit is and confirms that he understands. At the same time, a spell is cast, the prize. The woman explains that using such a short teleportation spell is consistent with the status of a third-tier mage, and reveals that he is grandfather's apprentice. The bespectacled man confirms this. The woman tells Rolf that she will teleport him directly to the barracks and asks him to prepare the soldiers. Rolf responds. The girl tells Ronbert that she needs to hurry and get an audience with the king, and asks if he can take care of everything here. Ronbert explains that he understands. The man casts a spell, asking the almighty god of light, Menios, to fulfill the contract and make. A man says that if he can't find a cure, he will die. A man says he can't afford to die. A man says he can't afford to die because he has a daughter. The guard announces that this is the entrance to the throne room and warns that free use of teleportation will cost lives. The cloaked man explains that it is teleportation magic and asks who he is. The guard and the other guard are surprised by the man's appearance. The woman says it's urgent and orders them to go and report to His Majesty. The man in the helmet is surprised, and another man shouts at Syria, asking what's going on. The woman orders silence and repeats that it's urgent, threatening to use magic to destroy the door if she doesn't do it immediately. The man announces that the king is receiving a visitor. The man explains that the king is busy with important matters and does not wish to be distracted. The man says that the visitor must wait. Syria Workland asks why the royal chief mage isn't here if the matter is so urgent. Daltonist yells at Syria Workland's behavior, which has shown disrespect to His Majesty. Daltonist orders this to cease. Emperor Vinyl Eisenhart reports that Syria had to do so much to get an amazed audience, so something definitely happened, and yet he says he is silent. The man apologizes for his rudeness and confirms his agreement with the king. The king grants Syria permission to speak. Syria states that she wishes to receive permission to command the royal guard. The man says the mage wants to command the royal guard and is willing to grant permission if he's convinced, to which the other man is indignant and asks what he's talking about. The man asks where Gyetsudano is. The girl replies that the head of the Altomia Empire's mages, Gyetsu work, is. The man says that the guy's name was Gyetsu and he was constantly looking at him with disdainful eyes. The image contains no speech bubbles or text containing dialogue or explanations. A man in armor and a cloak walks through a castle courtyard. In the top right section, a man addresses an old man and asks why he summoned him here. In the upper right corner, mice are watching the scene. Ryouma explains that people from his world don't fight with swords or spears. The man explains that this is because people from his world have the ability. The man explains that in this world, when you kill a living creature, part of its power becomes yours, and if you kill dragons, you can gain the power equal to 100 of them. He says that he has just absorbed the power of 4 soldiers, and the man confirms this, adding that if it is a person. Ryouma says that 100 dragons seems to be a truly different world. He says that thanks to the money he borrowed from those he killed, he was able to change into these clothes, and muses that dumping the armor outside the city was a good idea, because those pursuing him would never expect him to dine inside the city. The man asks what he should do now. A woman invites Ryouma to have a drink with her, explaining that he's the reason her break is over. Ryouma says he didn't order beer and asks if it's beer. The woman insists he's drinking and buys him one. Ryouma thinks he's only 16 and has feelings for her. Ryouma says he looks older than his age and thanks him for the treat. The man says Ryouma is a good guy. Ryouma asks why. The man explains that a good person is someone who knows how to say sorry and thank you. The man asks if this is his first time in the capital of the Altomia Empire. He confirms and explains that his parents died suddenly of illness. The man apologizes for asking, and he says it's nothing. He then explains that he's thinking of trying to live here, and Ryouma says he's quite good with a sword. The man says a blacksmith isn't suitable because he's too old. Ryouma explains that he could try becoming a merchant, but he'd have to start as an apprentice. The man says that's a bit difficult. He suggests becoming a mercenary or an adventurer. Ryouma thinks. He asks what an adventurer is. The man explains that becoming an adventurer is quite simple. You just need to go to the bank and the guild to register, both of which are nearby, and you don't even need an ID. He apologizes for his ignorance and asks how to become an adventurer. Ryouma says he's come to join the Adventurers Guild and wants to learn about the job. A woman greets him and asks what he needs. The woman explains that the place becomes the guild's tavern in the evenings. Ryouma says he can come back if he wants to talk. The woman asks to see his bank card, clarifying that he's a newbie. The woman says she's checking the card and asks if it's okay. He says he's 16. The woman repeats his age, saying he's 16. Ryouma says he was asked the same question at the bank and asks if he really does look much older. The woman explains that no, of course not, and apologizes for what she said. Ryouma says everything is fine, but the woman insists it isn't. The woman says she'll explain the system briefly. The woman asks if Ryouma knows about power absorption. Ryouma explains that after registering, adventurers are assigned a rank and level, with rank increasing or decreasing based on achievements, and level reflecting power. The boy tells you that if you kill a living creature, part of its power becomes yours. The man explains that at level 0 you have the average human strength, and at level 1 it doubles. The man says that at level 10 your strength is equal to that of 10 people. The girl explains that with her own strength, only one person was able to. Ryouma says the highest level is 7 and wonders why it's such a strange level. The girl replies that it's not something a beginner should worry about. He says he'll tell her about the quest now. He explains that if it's a combat quest, for example, to subdue a wild bee or a wild dog, then 3 copper coins will be awarded for each subjugation. There will also be a 1-level rank increase. The girl says it was a short one. A guy asks if there are any quests that require travel. A girl explains that newcomers with an F rank can accept a quest to a neighboring town, perhaps a delivery one. The woman says it could be an escort mission, such as going beyond the kingdom's borders. The second woman lists the locations. Garuka, M. Ryouma says he's a wanted man and must leave Otomia as soon as possible, and he's using this opportunity to escape. He explains that the closest route to the border is south. He announces that he will take a mission to Merfolin in the east. He explains that there are indeed no katanas in this place and says that at least a shamshira or some kind of longsword will be enough for him. The guy asks if the other guy has a weapon. Ryouma says he only has his bare hands. The woman says that this is stupid and explains that adventurers are not usually killed by large, strong monsters because most of them can simply be outrun, and adventurers are killed by weaker creatures out of carelessness. He listens. The guy says he's going to buy the whole place and advises his grandmother to just retire. The woman explains that no one knows what will happen outside the city, so they need to be prepared for anything. Ryouma says he's looking for a small weapon and apologizes. He explains that he knows nothing about this world and the man says he doesn't have a weapon. The man says his weapon doesn't contain anything. The man demands to hear it again and calls it convenient. He apologizes and explains that the tavern owner asked him to come here. The man says he should have said that earlier. The man asks if he's a newbie. The blacksmith tells Ryouma to wait a bit and asks him not to say anything convenient or suitable is made in his shop. Ryouma explains that he just registered with the guild today and asks how many times this has happened. Then Ryouma asks what about this dagger, and the man says the young man clearly knows his way around weapons. Ryouma asks if he's a young man. Ryouma explains that, if possible, he'd like a single-edged sword with a curved blade. The man asks if that means a katana, a weapon from another world. Ryouma is surprised. The man explains that normal weapons will likely be useless to Ryouma, then invites him inside and shows him his collection of weapons from another world. The man explains the properties of the various weapons. Sai can be used not only for attack but also for defense. Nunchaku when used with a fillip. The top right text explains that the gabishi is a short, offensive weapon that can also be used as a throwing weapon. The center text explains that the chakuram is a throwing weapon from ancient India. The left text explains that friction lock baton is a highly mobile weapon that can be shortened and extended. The man says Ryouma really knows how to use a weapon. Ryouma says that this manriki-gusai isn't suitable for him. He doesn't feel it has any practical use. Ryouma explains that he tried practicing with this weapon, but doubts he can actually use it. Ryouma decides to take the manriki-gusai. The woman says she's glad to be back and asks how everything went. Ryouma replies that it seems to have gone well. The man smiles and says that's fine and asks if he received the quest letter. Surprised, he asks what kind of quest letter it is. The man explains that the guild is supposed to issue such a letter. He replies that he doesn't think he has one. The man confirms that are. The woman says that every newbie makes mistakes. So today is enough and it's time to close, but tomorrow it's better to return to the guild and pick it up. Ryouma apologizes and thanks for the information. The man says it's no big deal and suggests another solution instead. The man tells everyone that this guy is new and asks them to be kind to him, and then offers to drink to him. He lies on the bed and looks at the ceiling. Ryouma says he's calmed down and even found a place to stay, and also reports that he was lucky enough to change his clothes quickly. He reports that thanks to this, the group that was pursuing him passed by without noticing him, although he should not have been careless. Ryouma reports that this guy Rolf is definitely a good warrior. The guy says that the girl from series can also be strong, but the problem is that she is a woman. Then he says that there is also that guy. Ryouma says that even though he only saw her for a moment, he got goosebumps on his spine, and if he were to describe her using a chessboard, she would definitely be a queen. The man tells Shaldina how one can find someone without knowing their face and asks if she knows any special information. The man addresses Shaldina. The text reveals that this is the first princess, Shaldina Eisenhart, of the Altomia Empire. The woman says everything is fine. The man says that even without knowing the killer's face, he can still identify him. The woman explains that it is the killer. The woman demands to know what's going on and asks why they haven't caught the killer. The man explains that it's dangerous to continue overnight and says they'll return to review countermeasures for tomorrow. The woman objects, and the man orders Orlando to take Syria away. The man confirms. In the top right, Ryouma asks to be excused. A girl asks Orlando to let her down, but he says he can't. In the top left, a man asks Shaldina where they'll go tomorrow. Shaldina says she'll go east, and the others will go south. A man with an eye patch says that if someone wants to escape the country, they shouldn't go south, but east. The woman explains that the south is the shortest route to the border, but she has a strange feeling about the east. She explains that there are many reasons why the murderer. A man suggests mobilizing the Adelpho garrison, but another man explains that this is impossible, as if the garrison were to mobilize, they would be attacked by Zaruda, and they could not count on the nobles' help. The man confirms that there was no noble uprising after Gaetsudu's death. Ryouma reports that. He says that even if they are at a disadvantage, the wolves growl and charge forward. Ryouma prepares to attack, holding his sword in both hands. The woman reports that they caught 54 wild dogs, 31 wild bees, and 39 wild rabbits, noting that this is quite a lot. He explains that because of this, the sword he bought yesterday has become dull, and he wants to sharpen it. Ryouma really hunted all of this with just one sword and did it in one day. Ryouma says yes. He says the reward is 4 silver and 31 copper coins and at the same time says that it is amazing. He thought that he was a mage with destructive magic or something like that. The guy says the lunch cost him 5 copper coins, and he figures that's worth 43,000 yen. The girl congratulates Mikoshiba on achieving the WF rank. Ryouma says that's not bad. Ryouma asks if he's already advanced, and the girl remarks. He says it's too unexpected and like a joke. The woman explains that after a promotion the rewards will double and says that all talented people say that, but that's the most interesting part. The man explains that adventurers' deaths are most often due to carelessness and advises Ryouma to be wary of opponents weaker than himself. Ryouma asks how much a healing potion costs and warns that overconfidence can be dangerous. The woman explains that a lot of money can be made with it. The girl explains that gold coins are needed to purchase items created with magic, and that one high-grade one costs 10 gold coins. The man says the item is worth 1,000,000 yen. The man exclaims that it's very expensive. The woman explains that in this world, getting injured is equivalent to death, and there's no insurance, so it's best to buy another sword just in case. Ryouma shouts that he risked his life to complete the task and demands to know why he can't receive the reward. The man explains that although Ryouma, he informs him that this bandit is not one of the Red Moon bandits in the quest and that while he was wasting time on this, they attacked a neighboring village. The man explains that many young girls were kidnapped. Ryouma asks if he had eliminated the Red Moon bandits. Then none of this would have happened. The man explains that the kidnapped girls would likely be sold into slavery. The man explains that he's not saying that, but it could have been prevented. Ryouma admits his guilt and promises to pay. He remains silent. The woman says this happens often. He asks if she means failing the quest. The woman explains that Gori-san is a good mercenary, but this time he forgot to conduct the necessary investigation into the adventurer, which led to this outcome. She explains that in most cases, quests can affect the future of many people, and asks him to remember this. Ryouma says his thoughts were a bit superficial and explains that this is different from the game, as the quest affects the life of the person who receives it. He then says the word quests and examines the map. He reports that if he continues east, the city of Aru should be nearby, but he doesn't see anyone and asks if there might be bandits here. Then he notices something and expresses surprise. The guy reports a big catch today and asks how business has been going lately. The man explains that business is going well. They got a lot from that village yesterday, shows a chest of coins, and says there must be at least 500 gold coins in it. The guy says that if the boss finds out about this, he'll be fined. The girl on the right says that if they can't get out, they'll die here. The girl on the left says the chains won't loosen until they find the key. The man says the boss doesn't know these slaves are here and says they can simply be disposed of later. The man explains that the owner was ruthless, escaping with his guards. The man explains that there's no other way out, and that being captured by them, the Red Moon bandits, means death. Ryouma says of course. The man says if. The girl warns that if you touch them, they will bite off their tongues and die. She asks him not to joke. The man explains that slaves who wear this collar can neither commit suicide nor rebel. The girl screams. The girl says that she has decided to go with the blonde guy, and the man replies that then he will take care of the silver-haired guy. The man says that the young people must be on guard and at the same time keep control of the two girls so that they hold on tightly. Ryouma says he can't afford to relax. He then unbuckles his clothes. The girl tells them that if they're not careful, they could die. The woman explains that they can't afford to make a mistake, or everything will be lost. The man says he's not going to give up and will fight to the end. The boy says he's not going to fight. The girl expresses surprise. The man yells, asking who he is and accusing him of being so bold as to get involved with their group, the Red Moon Bandits. The boy remains silent. The guy explains what he's doing. The man with the headband reacts with surprise. Ryouma grabs the man's arm. The man with the headband curses. The man with the headband stares ahead tensely. He strikes back, parrying his opponent's attack. The man tries to stab him with a dagger, but he parries it. Ryouma strikes. The man retreats, expressing fear. Ryouma looks determined. He says he can't let them die. The girls look at him silently. The girl asks if everything is okay between the two of them. Ryouma says that everything is fine. He reports that everything seems to have gone well. A girl from afar apologizes to him and says that he is bleeding. The man touches his face and asks if he is okay. He replies that he is fine, and the man begins to say that he is. Rora apologizes for the late introduction and gives her name. Sarah says she's Rora's younger sister. The image does not contain speech bubbles or text to convey the character's actions or communication. Ryouma says they're twins and asks if they're okay. The girl replies that they are. The girls thank Ryouma for saving them. He says he has no right to accept gratitude and begins to explain that in order to kill everyone, he waited until they lowered their weapons and even took off their pants. The girl says that he waited until she was almost raped. He says he will not make excuses and admits that he allowed the girls to pass. The woman says everything is fine and could have been worse. The girl says that's exactly how it is. Ryouma thanks them and says he can't express his gratitude enough and is very grateful. He says that if you talk so much, then still. He explains that fair skin, a small, sweet face, a strong build, and, above all, breasts. That's what the bandits couldn't resist. The man says this with a question. The girl asks if something is wrong. Ryouma says he was just thinking about something. Ryouma explains that the most noticeable things are the collars and shackles, although the outfits resemble Arabic belly dancing costumes. A girl asks what the last names of her interlocutors are, to which another girl replies that slaves don't have last names. The girl says that this is bad and that he shouldn't have interfered. She asks Ryouma to state his name. Ryouma explains that his full name is Mikoshiba Ryouma. He says that if the girls want, he can deliver them to Aru, and asks what they are going to do now. The girl apologizes and says that they cannot leave without the master's permission. He is surprised and asks if she really says that, then says that without the master's permission they cannot. Ryouma says yes. The girl reports that the owner fled with the guards when the bandits showed up. Ryouma explains that the owner ran away and left the two of them behind. He says that they cannot move without the master's order and asks if the girls will stay here. The girls answer yes. Ryouma explains that if there are no problems, training can begin tomorrow. The girl says she's ready and wants to start as soon as possible. The other girl says she's also ready and will try her best. The guy says something incredible is happening and asks if it is really happening. The man says the empire is still on his tail and wants to get them to the city quickly and then part ways. The man explains that the two are slaves whose property belongs to someone else, and he can only help to a certain extent. The man says that if it gets dark, Ryouma announces that he will now leave. The girl replies that she will and thanks him. Ryouma then reflects that he can only help so much and wonders if he was simply being a hypocrite. He reports that it is already quite far from the two girls. Then he reacts sharply to the scream. The boy says he shouldn't act so calmly. The man on the horse says he's memorized the girl's face and will now find her, no matter where she runs. The girl screams. The woman screams Sora's name. Ryouma says he thought he'd already killed him and wonders if it's Sarah's voice. The man notices something in the grass. He says the million-yen bottle really worked. He's too fast and doesn't understand how to catch up with him now. He yells at Miko, Shiba-sama and Rora. He asks if she is alive, to which she replies that she is fine. He says that he will think about something and ask. The guy says he doesn't understand. The girl asks him to hurry, as time is short. Ryouma looks at the girl silently, and she looks at him tensely. The man says it's not just a hand. It's a hand that can change everything. The woman says it's okay, and the man agrees and asks if it's okay. The man explains that he's always felt something strange about these two and wonders if they're really just slaves. The boy says she's praying. The girl asks the great god Harva, saying she dedicates her soul, body, and heart to him. The guy asks her to take his blood as an offer and make a contract. The girl silently kisses the guy's hand. The girl says that this is the end. The girl tells the master that she apologizes for using her powers and turns to him. Ryouma responds with agreement and surprise. The girl reports that everything is ready. The girl asks the spirit of the wind to listen to her request and order him to strike down this man. He says that it is. The girl says she's using the wind-slash technique. The man says he can't believe this woman is a mage. The man exclaims in surprise. The girl says Rora. Ryouma says it's the same thing the old man used. The man on the horse says it's the devil. The girl yells wind-slash. He says master. The girl says that now they must return Sarah. The girl asks the wind spirit to fulfill her request and destroy her enemy. Then she and Ryouma cast the wind-slash spell together. The image depicts a man and a woman fighting together on horseback. The man holds the reins and controls the horse, while the woman stands in front of him, preparing to attack or defend. The horse charges forward, creating a sense of dynamic movement. The text provides the manga's title, authors, and chapter number. The woman says they'll get Sarah back now. The man asks how to get her back if they're already more than a kilometer away. The woman explains the only way is to summon the wind spirit and asks for her request to be fulfilled, to make her as fast as the wind, and activates wind protection. The man is surprised. The girl reports that the fireball is moving at high speed and is heading towards them. Ryouma says he's surprised. The guy says that this will probably stop him. The girl screams Sarah's name. The man moves, preparing to attack. A girl hugs another girl and speaks to her, addressing her as an older sister. Ryouma looks at the road and explains that it's wind magic that allows one to cover such a distance in an instant. He says he can't say he doesn't know, but he notices that the girl already suspects something. The girl explains that she doesn't know if this is possible. He ponders what to do next, and the girl speculates that it's possible to master martial arts at this level but not know about magic. Ryouma says he can't afford to lose because it would mean death. The girl says she's not going to give up either and will fight to the end. Ryouma explains that they must join forces to survive. The boy yells at the horse to move, explaining that the bandit's legs are stuck under the horse and he can't move. The girl apologizes and asks Sarah if she's hurt. Sarah says she didn't resist, so she's fine. He asks where the bandit is. The girl says let the owner decide. Ryouma asks if he meant the owner. The girl answers affirmatively. Ryouma says that if it suits the girl, he'll make a decision. The girl confirms this. The boy begs for mercy and offers money or women, warning that the Red Moon Gang has over 100 members and that they are even part of Zaruda's army. The man shouts that Zaruda won't be happy if they get involved and demands that they stay away. He repeats that he told them to stay away. Ryouma says that if he kills here, no one will know who did it, and asks if the man plans to report to Zaruda after death. The man explains that the dead cannot speak, and that he certainly won't allow Ryouma to live. The woman says she has a daughter and asks him to stop. The girl asks if it's okay to treat him like that. The man remains silent. Ryouma says there is a problem. The woman says she just wanted to know if she could get more information from him. He says it's not even known if he was telling the truth. Ryouma says that you shouldn't believe everything a thief says and adds that it's good that he got his sister back. The girl thanks Ryouma, calling him master. Ryouma explains that there's no need to thank him and asks why she calls him master. The girl says that he's been thinking about this for a long time. The woman says they just took a blood oath, so she should call the man master. The woman asks if a blood oath means they cut their little fingers and mixed blood. The woman asks the man to take a blood oath with her. The man confirms. The girl informs him that the master must make a blood oath with Sarah. The girl confirms this. Ryouma asks for a break and says that Rora is under no obligation to serve him or do anything. The man asks what's happening right now and what it is. The girl on the top right says that it's not true and asks if they hate them. The girls on the top left ask if he hates them. He explains that it's not true and asks if they're waiting for their master in this place. The girl on the bottom right says that if. The man explains that if he takes a blood oath, the girl will go to the city. The man confirms that this requires a blood oath. The girl says she understands and suggests simply making the oath. The man says that if they continue walking, they will still reach City A by nightfall. The girl says she certainly agrees. Ryouma says they're heading back to the cart to collect their luggage and valuables. Ryouma notices someone is already at the cart. The man is surprised. The man yells in surprise and says it's Rora and Sarah, asking if they're okay. The man asks if the girls were hurt by the bandits and asks if they're okay. Ryouma says he was worried. The man asks if the girl was really raped by bandits, and the girl replies with a question. The girl says it's a good thing she spent 5 years raising him and asks what to do if her value drops. The woman warns them not to approach and threatens that if they come any closer, she will stab them. The man reacts with bewilderment. The man says that the girl dares to behave rudely to him and calls them ungrateful, pointing out that they dared to point a sword at their master, while calling them mere goods. Ryouma tells Ryouma that the fat man is her master and asks if he's an enemy. Ryouma remains silent and then reveals that he used to be. He says he understands. The woman says he's always been their enemy. He says it's true. The fat man tells the giant to stop doing useless things, then remarks that he has a good body. Ryouma points out that he's trying to be a charming prince. The man says he can sell the other man into slavery. Then the man is astonished to see a stream of blood spurting from his eye. The girl says she can't lose because this is her last chance. The woman says she's not going to give in. First, the woman says she can't let them pass and threatens them. Then Ryouma explains he has no intention of fighting and asks them not to interfere. The woman says she won't give up, despite the blood coming from her mouth. The woman breathes heavily and clenches her fist. He watches silently. Ryouma says they should go to a roof first, and then they can talk about everything else he wants to ask. The girl agrees. The girl says she understands. Ryouma says he just wanted to save someone, but it seems he's gotten himself into a terrible mess. The woman sits bleeding and breathing heavily. He says he can't afford to relax. The man explains he can't afford to relax. The man says he cooked food. The man says he's tired. The guy says they apologize for keeping the owner waiting. Ryouma says let's talk over food and asks them to sit down instead of standing around. The woman reports that slaves cannot eat at the same table with their master and denies this. The girl says they can't leave because the door is locked. The second girl explains that the guard has the key. Ryouma says he'll try to find a way out. The guy reacts with surprise to what's happening. The girl on the right explains that they've come to the bathhouse, and the girl on the left looks at the guy questioningly. The guy turns to them, expressing bewilderment. Ryouma says to wait and asks to wait a minute. He says that at least they have some clothes on now. Then he asks them to hurry up and sit down on the chairs, as dinner is about to begin. The girls sit silently next to each other. The girl says they'll eat later because they can't sit at the same table with their master, and the boy explains that the food will get cold. The woman explains that slaves like them have never eaten hot food before. Ryouma notices the look and says he's seen it before, then says he wants to. He says that he is now their master and orders them to do something, to which the girls agree. Ryouma tells them to sit on these chairs and eat with him. The girls listen. He says that eating alone will ruin the taste of the food. The man at the table says that if it's his decision, he understands. He notices that they look very awkward. Ryouma explains that he wants to confirm that he has become her master because they exchanged a blood oath. The woman explains that their master-slave relationship was formed precisely because of this oath, adding that it is because of this that they became his combat slaves. He asks about combat slaves. The man explains that in addition to sex and labor slaves, there are combat slaves, who are used specifically for fighting, but their powers are usually sealed so they cannot rebel against their master, and without their master's permission, they cannot fight. He asks how the two. The girl says that's true, and the other girl says that Sarah is fine and asks the master to keep what she's about to tell a secret. Ryouma explains the truth. The girl explains that their family name is Malfist, and their family served as senior knights in the kingdom to the west. 5 years ago, in the midst of a war with the kingdom of Shaudora over tariffs, the chancellor betrayed the kingdom of Clifford, leading to its downfall. The man reports that they were supposed to escape on a ship disguised as a cargo vessel. The woman reports that they were betrayed by a guard they had trusted for years, and then sold to a slave trader, Azos. Ryouma says it was all in vain despite all the trials. The woman says they trusted the guards, but couldn't see how weak people are to temptation. The man explains that this guy, Azos, is the slave trader they encountered on the cart, and that all their knowledge of combat slaves came from him. He says that if they Ryuma says it's as if their father expected this turn of events, but immediately denies it. He asks if this means he should become a slave to somehow cope with the situation, using a blood oath. The girl explains that they've been waiting for someone they can trust for a long time, and this is who. He says he still protected them even though he was alone. The girl says she understands. He explains that as their master, he now sets them free and gives them the money he received from the slave trader Azos so they can start a new life. The girl says they can't, and the other girl says they're willing to pay him back with their lives for protecting them, Malphus' purity, and his life. Ryuma explains that he, too, has his own circumstances. The man asks if he can ask him a question, and the girl asks if it's related to that. He says that the other person knows nothing about magic or the blood oath, and that being someone on the level of the master is too strange. The woman reveals that he truly came from another world. Ryuma explains that he was summoned by a man named Gyetsu from the Empire, and has been in hiding ever since. Ryuma explains that, fortunately, no one knows his face. The woman says he'll only slow her down and never thought about having slaves. He explains he doesn't want slaves, but if they found her tracks and followed her, he wants them to follow their own will. The girl on the right says that if this is the master's order, then the man on the right explains that they understood. Ryuma says he knew this would happen and asks him to just think about it. The girl asks to let them repay him before then. The girl asks what if the master takes them with him to his world. The other girl says that one day he will have to return to his world. He reports that he can't believe this happened. The girl says it's Sarah's great idea, another girl agrees to go with her, and a third asks to wait and declines. Ryuma says no several times. The man says he's going to bring them both back. The man turns to Asuka and says he's back. He says he's okay. The girl says she's glad he's okay and calls him by name. The girl approaches him. The woman asks where the man was and who he is. Two girls explain that they are Ryuma's slaves, battle slaves. The man says he didn't know Ryuma was such a person and expresses relief that he's okay, then orders him to die. The guy says then thinks about sleep. Ryuma says that if he is with them, it will reduce suspicions that he ran away. The woman says that first you need to cross the border. He says this to himself, holding the document in his hand. The woman shows her bag. Ryuma asks how much it costs. The girl asks to wait a minute. A man and woman in the background react to the situation. The woman informs him that the price will be around 3,000 gold coins and apologizes for the wait. He is surprised by the amount. The woman explains that if they exchange all the jewelry at once, that's the maximum offer. The woman says it's not that she's unhappy. The man replies that it's wonderful and that they'll give her the money right away. The woman smiles and wonders if she's been deceived. Ryuma says he can't take back what he said and suggests they just go back. The man calls Roru and Sarah by name, then shows them 2 rings and says that before he exchanged all the jewelry for money, he took these 2 rings and will give them to them. Roru and Sarah look at the rings in surprise. The woman says the situation is becoming problematic and that she heard from the guild that Princess Shaldina herself has come here, and if it's just a blockade, someone could be bribed. He explains that it could be a trap and apologizes. The woman asks if there will be a death sentence if. The girl says there's no need to apologize, but staying in one place for too long is dangerous. She explains that with such a big hunt, one must be careful in their actions. Ryuma remains silent. He explains that the eastern border is geographically blocked, so it's impossible to go there, but that could be exactly what the enemy wanted. He says that if so, then the only way to escape is along the city's main road and through the northern forest. He explains that if he were in the enemy's place, the guy says that we need to run through the northern forest. The man says that it's good. Ryuma says he'll show who's the hunter and who's the prey. The girl asks who's the prey. The man explains that the killer is heading east, and since they've already closed the border, his only escape route is through the forest, so they need to set a trap there, even though they don't yet know what he looks like. The woman says they just need to hear it from the killer himself. The man agrees, and the woman says it's no problem. The man says he knows something and explains that it doesn't matter whether someone came from another world or not. The text says it's north of Ara, A forest near the border. Ryouma says there's no need to be so scared. The guy says he's not a bandit and apologizes for scaring him. He remains silent. The guy asks permission to sit next to him. The man says it smells nice here and asks why Ryouma is in such a place, as he looks like an adventurer. Ryouma says he doesn't remember if he gave him permission to sit here. He says he heard the border was closed in Aru. He also says the word well. Ryouma says that since he doesn't know when the road will reopen, he's decided to cross through the forest. Ryouma says he won't allow it. Despite this, the man says it's disappointing. The man says he wouldn't advise going through the forest alone, as the area around town is full of wild dogs. He asks if the man is also planning to go through the forest alone and then wants to know who he is. The man apologizes for the late introduction and says his name is Saito Hideaki. Ryouma offers to try a piece of food, but the man declines and thanks her. The man reveals that he is the deputy captain of the Altomia Empire's succubus knights. The man explains that he's chasing a certain person in the forest, but it's a shame he doesn't know his face, so he asks Ryouma to follow them back to camp. Ryouma remains silent. A man reports that he's captured someone who may have come from another world. The man explains that he smells just like him. The woman says that's true, that he's now her second in command, and asks him to lead her because she wants to try it. Ryouma apologizes for the delay and explains that his boss was eager to meet him. Ryouma remarks that the handcuffs seem too heavy and asks if they will be removed once he is cleared of suspicion. The man replies that, of course, they will be removed. The woman says that everything depends on him. He looks forward. The woman explains something. The boy explains that crossing the forest in such a situation does seem suspicious, but that's okay. The girl says it doesn't raise suspicion. Ryouma asks if she really represents the Empire and clarifies that she is Princess Shalden. The girl confirms this and apologizes for her rudeness. She thanks him for the privilege. The boy informs her that she is the person from another world they are looking for. The man explains that even after the royal family used such a polite method of communication, she still responded normally, which is beyond the capabilities of people from this world. The girl says there is no use pretending not to understand and asks about. The king explains that in this world, royalty is like gods, and the common people immediately bow upon hearing his words. Ryouma reveals his name is Mikoshiba Ryouma. The man says Ryouma is Japanese. Another man notes that Ryouma is quick to admit it and asks. He says he was called into this world 10 years ago. The man with glasses says he has the same situation and asks if this is true for him. He confirms. The woman says to stop talking and informs Ryouma that he will be transferred back to the captain, as they are looking for a suitable way to deal with him. The man explains that despite his weak physical strength after being summoned, Ryouma managed to get here, and it's a shame that if he had agreed to work for them, the unification of the lands would have been. He says he doesn't work for another and asks not to joke. The man with the scythe asks if the summoned shouldn't obey the summoner. He finds this strange. He wonders why the other is so calm, whether he doesn't understand his situation, since the scouts will return soon, and now. The man states that although it was His Majesty's order to bring him back alive, he must be dealt with here and now. The girl tells Sato to stop and accuses him of disobeying His Majesty's direct order and daring to draw his sword first. Sato explains that he is ready to accept the order. Ryouma says he'll let him have his last words because they were born in the same country. The man says he has no courage, and Ryouma he replies that this isn't entirely true. Then Ryouma says that they are the ones who should die. The man asks His Highness, the Spirit of the Wind, to listen to his request. A young man apologizes to a high-ranking official and asks if he's okay. He replies that he's fine. The man asks what happened. He explains that it was a magical spell called Wind Blade. The man is surprised that it was magic. Ryouma says the timing was perfect and thanks Sarah. Sarah says she's glad to see the owner is okay. The man, surprised, asks if it's his friend. Sarah explains that it was really good, and he didn't hurt her. The woman says that since she's his slave, she'll agree, of course. The man asks if she really intends to do this, and the woman confirms. The man is surprised that she called herself a slave. He asks where Rora is and if she's okay. The man says that Rora is taking care of the others, and the woman says, the woman reports that these soldiers actually launched a magical attack. Ryouma says he didn't expect that and is surprised that these are combat slaves who can use magic. The woman explains that not many people in this world can use magic. The man explains that if they are willing to work for the empire, they will. The girl asks who is in front of her. The woman explains that they obey their master, and his enemies are their enemies. The woman with long hair explains that these girls seem quite capable. Ryouma says that even though they are so strong, he doesn't understand why they follow him. The girl says, turning to him, Ryouma says it's not too late to back out. The man and woman react silently to his words. He says it's a good chance to gain fame. The man explains that if he manages to kill the royal, fame will spread across the continent. The boy considers that he might somehow manage, giving it his all, and considers at least Shaldina-sama but says no. The girl says that either of them could die. Then she says that they are both willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Ryouma asks if they are both willing to give their lives for him. The boy explains that even so, Saito is trying to protect the royal family, and he doesn't want them both to die. He thanks them for their understanding and suggests they go. The girl tells Saito to put away his sword. The man reflects that their lives are just as valuable as the royal family's. The boy yells for him to wait, then says he wants to ask a question. Ryouma asks if he's some kind of mafia boss from Japan. The boy explains that he's only 16 and was just an ordinary high school student, but insists he's serious. The guy says he was summoned from a peaceful era in Japan and asks why he can kill people so easily. He explains that at what point did he lose the right to defend himself from those who tried to kill him, and asks in return whether he shouldn't just stand still when he's being beaten. And Ryouma says he chooses to fight only when he's determined to kill. The man says now is not the time to discuss his life philosophy and suggests they go. The girl agrees and calls Ryouma by name. The woman says he can run wherever he wants, but one day the empire will unite the continent, and then he will have nowhere to hide. He says that then their only option is to return to his world. The woman says the word good. The girl calls out to the master, pointing to the side. Ryouma says, oh. The woman tells them they should head to the trading area near the oasis, where many people go. The man explains that this is to stock up on necessary goods and find a way back to Earth. The girl screams, warning the master of the danger. Ryouma says he's surprised. A large monster with sharp teeth appears nearby and suddenly attacks. The girl reports that it is a sandworm. He and two other men look at the huge monster. Ryouma tells Sarah and Rora not to move. Sarah explains that the creature has turned away from her and is perhaps openly inviting her. She believes it could be a trap, allowing the creature to evade her attack and counterattack from behind, with the fighting position very advantageous for it. A girl says that the sandworm's vision is really very good. Another girl clarifies that he doesn't mean exactly that. He says let's do it. He explains that it shouldn't be used to take advantage of someone's vision, and the more people there are, the more effective it can be. He adds, Ryouma says it's not just a dragon, but an ancient monster that shouldn't have awakened. The man explains that if it awakens, the world will be in great danger. The girl says they need to team up to stop it. The woman asks the master to deliver the finishing blow. He refuses, explaining that he doesn't have such a hobby, and says he'll leave it to the woman. The girl explains that the master can absorb prana, and the man asks if this means people from another world can absorb more, and the girl confirms this. Ryouma explains that there's something similar in the game, where someone else damages a monster to 1 HP, and then hits it to gain experience. He says he can't believe there's a way to return to Earth. Anna Maria confirms this. Ryouma says they spent 2 months crossing the desert to get here and can't believe it. He says he heard Anna Maria definitely has a way. Anna Maria remains silent. Ryouma explains that there are only 9 types of magic in this world and that there are 3 types of magic. It is reported that in order to create supernatural phenomena, one must cast verbal magic spells in advance and offer one's prana to a god, demon, or spirit. Ryouma explains that the word magic is used in these 3 types of summoning magic, The man explains that summoners must offer their prana to the god. He explains that the seal is applied to the weapon to absorb the user's prana into the weapon. The man explains that summoning people from his world is no problem. He explains that unless there is permission from the god who rules the land, no one can be brought to this land, and adds that this is exactly how it is. Ryouma says you just need to know the god's name. The girl says that's true. The woman says she knows the names of several gods: Tsukuyami, Susanoo, Amaterasu, Izanagi, Izanami, and if that's not enough, she can gather information from people who have been summoned here, like herself. The girl explains that if they manage to find some kind of writing. The woman says she doesn't know who said it and what can bring him back to his world. But the woman explains that the book has undergone several hundred years of editing and asks if the man understands what she means. The woman reports that all the gods' names written in the book have been verified. The second woman suggests that this may be because the man knows she's holding the book. Ryouma says several hundred years. Ryouma repeats the question of several hundred years. The woman reports that this is true of this world. The woman explains that it's quite fortunate that he seems competent. The girl reports that the owner is a very gentle man. The woman says he was strangely calm, and it's hard to imagine him being so angry now, even when he was saving them or when they were fighting Princess Shaldina. The girl asks if he's truly angry now, and the woman clarifies the word. The woman explains that the master is angry because he can't return to his old world, adding that he knows this because he learned his people were enslaved. The woman asks what Sarah would think if she became someone's slave against her will and suggests considering the option. The girl says she'll kill whoever did it. The woman explains she'll take the girl back by any means necessary. The woman says she didn't ask about it, and in a way that's an answer. The woman says that being a combat slave isn't so bad. But there are people who don't have the ability to do it, and this has been going on for centuries. The man says that the master thinks about all the people who were forced into slavery, and all their anger is directed at him. The man says all his anger is now directed at their world. The girl explains that there's a chance the flames of his anger will burn everything in this world to ashes. The girl says, "Big sister." Two girls report that he isn't even responding to them and ask if he's okay, explaining that he's been locked in that room for 2 days and hasn't eaten. Ryouma asks where he is and what this place is. First, the man screams, asking who's there. Then a voice appears, saying it's nearby, that it exists and understands the man better than anyone, and urges him to get angry. The man asks what it's saying. Then the man asks what his wish is. The man replies that he wants to go home, to the house with his grandfather, and Ryouma says he needs to be angrier and blames whoever caused all this, specifying it's that Gaisu guy. Another voice explains that appropriate sacrifices and determination are needed and asks if he truly understands what needs to be done. This voice then declares that the world is on its own. The character reveals that another has the power to destroy this world. The girl reports that they heard screaming and knows it's rude, but they had to force their way in. Ryouma says, "Eh?" The man asks if it's Rora and Sarah. The girl says she's glad he's okay and asks him to go to the dining room first to get something to eat, as he hasn't eaten since he locked himself in that room. The man replies that he is and apologizes. The girl apologizes back, and the man says he can't breathe. The girls smile. The man says they broke down the door after hearing a scream because they thought the owner was in danger. Ryouma says, "Oh well." He says you can just ask the owner for the master key. The girl on the right says, "Ah." The woman asks if the man has just woken up and advises him to take some hot stew into the room, adding that it is also intended for 2 slaves. The man says he knows he eats a lot, but this is too much and asks him to wait. The woman asks what he is saying. The man expresses surprise. The woman reports that the two haven't eaten anything since they locked themselves in and says he's being too indifferent, offering to hurry up and take the food to them. Ryouma asks if it's really been 2 days in a row. The woman confirms, and Ryouma says it is. The guy thanks her for her concern, and the woman explains that there's no need to thank her, as that's her job. The woman says the guy is thanking the wrong people and says she's still charging for the broken door. The guy thanks her again and invites Rora and Sarah to eat together, and the woman reacts with surprise. The girl asks him to calm his anger, and the man apologizes for disturbing her. Ryouma says everything is fine, but the woman addresses the man, calling him master. Ryouma says this world is their home. The girl says that no matter how much the master hates this world, they will always be his allies, even now or in the future. He remains silent, then says that they are both idiots. The girl says they made him even angrier. The man says thank you. The girl says thank you too. The girl asks if he tolerates this. The girl says it would be okay if he cried and explains that he always acts like an adult. But in reality, Ryouma tells them not to laugh and asks them not to laugh. The girls laugh. He says he needs to collect the bodily fluids of a giant praying mantis, and confirms this with the word, okay. The girl replies yes. The girl then calls him master. Ryouma asks why the girl didn't touch Azos money and continued traveling. The girl explains that in this world, she has no family, no place to return to, not even a friend, and that all she has is herself. She explains that this is precisely why she chose to continue traveling as an adventurer, to somehow understand the meaning of life. The girl asks about the reason. He explains that it's not really a reason, but rather a warrior's journey to train himself. He says that fortunately, everything he learned from his grandfather proved useful, and the girl realizes that such power lies within her. The girl says, Master. The girl says that the master just said that he has no family or friends in this world, but doesn't he have slaves with him? The man remains silent. The woman says there's no need to apologize. The girl says there is, and Ryouma apologizes. The man says it's chapter 10, titled, The Attacker. The man explains that the original author is Ryota Hori, and the composition and direction are by Araki Fumi. The image contains no text or speech from the characters. It shows soaring seagulls, a sailing ship near the shore, and a view of a port city. The woman says there are plenty of shops in this city where you can buy everything you need. Ryouma explains that it's his first time here and he doesn't know where to go. He says that this time he won't fight, but will observe. The man on the right says that this is a good idea to avoid unnecessary risks. The guy asks if this is a mandatory assignment. Vals Henkel confirms and explains that he is in a difficult situation. Ryouma says he had a premonition after hearing that he was personally invited by the guildmaster himself and asks why them. The man explains that, according to the guild's guidelines, mandatory quests are only for high-ranking adventurers, but due to a staff shortage, he's accepting this urgent request from a very important client. The man explains that the mission involves escorting a group of merchants from the kingdom of Rhodesyria. The girl asks. The man informs them that the guild's license could be suspended or, in the worst case, revoked. He explains that the fee is quite high and that they'll be bringing several mercenaries with them, and their training includes the best equipment. The girl says so, this is his best equipment. Ryouma reports this. Leonie says this is a very strange assignment. She's already checked, and the merchants they're supposed to protect don't have any cargo. Leonie explains that she only took the assignment because of the high pay and asks if they couldn't have failed already. He says he's enjoying himself. Leonie reports that she. Bolt says it's his right hand. Ryouma remains silent, noticing his hand. The man says adventurers are the ones who accompany them. The man says that several girls and the one-armed man don't make him feel safe. He asks who it is, and the girl explains that she thinks it's Masaru-san, the client. The man says these twins are battle slaves. The man explains that female battle slaves are a rare sight and offers to find them a better master, explaining that young girls are more suited to the bedroom than the battlefield. Ryouma tells Masaru-san that she will show him a secret technique from the underworld as proof of their meeting today. He says that being a merchant can be tiring sometimes, and laughs that he's quite a good conversationalist. The man explains that in the underworld, they give not only chest massages but also shoulder massages. He says that a truly dangerous person usually doesn't seem dangerous at all, and it's a shame if a martial artist can get behind someone's back so easily. Ryouma says the merchant isn't really that hard to understand and asks Masaru if he's lying to them. Masaru laughs and says Ryouma is well-mannered, and Ryouma thanks him. Ryouma then reveals that the merchant is lying. The woman explains that the problem is who he's targeting and what type of trap it is. He says half the reason is because he doesn't like him, and the man says that's why he strangled him by the neck. The man asks the captain if they should just call off the mission now, and the woman replies that it's not. Ryouma says that if anything happens to the guild, they will be held accountable, and their license could be suspended or even revoked. The man and woman explain that mercenaries and adventurers are initially free, but this is thanks to the guild's support, without which nothing would happen. He reports that the likelihood of his own target being the one he's targeting is also quite high. He explains that, above all, he doesn't want to waste the lives of his comrades in vain. The man and the girl are discussing by the fire whether to call a few more people from the Scarlet Lion, to which the man replies that that's probably his problem. The woman reports that there is a possibility that the life of her interlocutor is also being hunted by murderers. Ryouma says that if that's the case, he'll just give up and die, then laughs and says the girl has courage. The girl asks if she can leave it to Sarah and explains that the problem is that she can't drive the carriage. The girl says that she will always obey her master's orders, so that he doesn't have to constantly ask her like that. The boy asks Bowles if he can ask him a question and clarifies that Bowles can use magic. The girl says she can use magic too and asks him to tell her everything. The man calls the boy over. The guy approaches a girl named Leonie and says she said she's the target. Leonie replies that if one of them dies, there's no point in holding a grudge. The guy explains that he's the captain of a mercenary group and asks what if he's the target. The guy turns to Leonie again and adds, Ryouma says he should stop using honorifics when people address him. The girl on the right says this from close range. The man and girl on the top left react with surprise and fear, and the girl on the bottom screams, "No!" The guy says the kiss should be normal. The girl says a surprise attack is not what's needed. The second girl explains that a surprise attack is just. On the top right, a girl is surprised. A man invites her to talk in a carriage and says he has good alcohol. On the top left, a girl warns that even if he agrees, it's not allowed. On the bottom right, a girl shouts that tricking a minor into drinking alcohol is illegal, and on the left, a girl. Ryouma says he's always ready for a strategy meeting and asks what the two are talking about. The girl explains that he can drink, after all. The man replies that the owner just needs to keep his mouth shut. The girl reacts. The girl reports that everything is going quite well. He explains that, as expected, they are approaching the kingdom's forest. The group is quite large, so they cannot make mistakes. He says that the archers should shoot first, and then capture the enemies when they are separated. The man says they shouldn't kill the witch and that they must prevent her from crossing the border at all costs. The girl shouts that they're here and calls for the master. The man warns them to be careful not to get hit by the arrows, and the girl says they'll speed up and pass right through them. The boy reports that a group of cavalry is chasing them and addresses a girl named Inigo. Ryouma says he knows. Ryouma explains that all the arrows are aimed at their carriage and asks if that means he's the target. He also calls it a gift from the Altomia Empire. He says to use this chance to create distance. The girl replies that she understands. The woman says the merchants are pointing swords at them and orders them to look forward. Ryouma expresses surprise. The man shouts for everyone to attack and orders them to advance. He reports that enemies are approaching from both sides and explains that he had already partly expected this. The guy asks what's going on and says they're really fighting each other. Ryouma explains what's going on. The woman reports that they're fighting each other. He explains that they predicted tomorrow's attack, and this gives them an advantage, since they know a trap is being set for them. The girl asks how this can help them. Ryouma says they know they're being set a trap and suggests they rephrase their words. The man and woman listen to him. The man says that whoever attacks first will have an advantage. He says that's true. The man talks about this. Ryouma says they can decide exactly where to attack them. He then explains that they are still a group of mercenaries escorting merchants to Rhodesyria and that they are not criminals. He adds that if they are attacked somewhere in plain sight, then the criminals will be those who attack regardless. The man explains that, just as they cannot recklessly harm Masara's client, who calls himself a merchant, the enemy will also be forced to find a clear spot to attack. He says the likelihood of them appearing with a large army is extremely low. The man explains that the most effective way to set up an ambush with a small force is. The man says that geographical advantages could be useful. The man asks what if they choose a random location. Ryouma says he doesn't think the organization is small enough to handle that. He says that a strategist who can't identify the best option will be judged by the other participants, and that morale is also a factor. The man announces that it has been decided to go with Plan 3. Another man says that it's not the best course of action. The woman asks if Plan 2 isn't an option, and adds that. A man asks a girl if her ears hurt, and the girl says she can't repeat it. Ryouma reports that the valley near the Rhodes-Syria border seems suspicious, and the entire mountain route is ideal for an ambush. He explains that no one will announce their names before an attack. The girl asks if Saito has a cold. The man replies that he's just talking to himself. The girl is interested. He reports that they are most likely ambushed in the valley near the Rhodes-Syria border and offers to confirm this information. He explains that if the enemy had mages it would be terrifying, but judging by them they have no means against mages. He explains that there is a high probability that. The young man explains that once the ambush begins, they will allow the merchants to escape ahead, but warns that merchants to watch out for will appear after the attack begins. The man explains that their fighting force should outnumber the merchants, but it will be dangerous if the merchants encounter reinforcements. The young man advises that if. Ryouma says it's still good for them and asks why. The man explains that the pincer move is effective against strong opponents like Ryouma, but they must be much stronger than those merchants. He says that if they're caught in a pincer movement, they just need to fight their way through the merchants. The girl says they have a surprise too. He explains that that was exactly the plan. Then he stops the horse. Ryouma explains what's going on and reveals that the merchants weren't enemies. The woman reports that the Crimson Lion members are fine, but several mercenaries were killed, and asks what to do now, explaining that according to the plan, they should already be leading the retreat. The man asks how Lionel is doing. He says everything is fine and asks Lionel to gather. Ryouma says it's time to go. The man with the headband looks surprised, and the man in the helmet looks tense. The boy says he's going to jump. The man says it's impossible. The boy explains he has to do it. The man says it's crazy. The boy says he can't back down. The man warns it's dangerous. The boy jumps over the abyss on his horse. A knight reports that there's no one in the abandoned carriage, and the captain says they've been tricked. Another knight reports that the witch has escaped and orders them to pursue her, while a third knight tells them not to let them escape. Ryouma is surprised and says that the witch. The boy reports that they've taken the bait. The man says Ryouma has deceived them well. Ryouma explains that while he still has doubts, at least everything is going according to plan. The man explains that everything that happens next will fall on the girl's shoulders, and he expects a lot from her. The woman looks forward. The man calls Rora. The woman is surprised. The woman addresses the man, calling him master. The man smiles. The woman says she'll immediately prepare for tomorrow. The girl says she has an important conversation. The girl asks if she's being exiled. Ryouma says, "What?" He says he just knew the girl hates combat slaves and asks what she wants. The girl explains that the master likes thin and soft girls and that muscles disgust her, but immediately corrects herself that muscles are actually reliable. He says he wants to leave her the last pieces. Ryouma explains that after turning and luring the enemies, they will lead the team into a magic circle, where they will be trapped without even noticing, and orders them to destroy the enemies with magic on his signal. The girl promises to do everything in her power to serve and cleanse the land of enemies. The man says that the enemies will also be riding horses. The girl says, "Ah." The man explains that he asked Bolt for help. The girl asks if Bolt is the right hand of Lionel, the heart of the Crimson Lion. The man explains that it's quite difficult to use verbal magic against the fast ones. Ryouma says Rora is his battle slave. He explains that he wants her to do it instead of Bolt, because for him, she's the only person who can help. He says that the only one who can change the situation is Rora. The soldier declares that the witch must not be allowed to escape and orders everyone to be killed, leaving no survivors. The man asks what to do, as the merchants are also heading that way. Ryouma explains that in this scenario, the merchants will also perish along with the enemies. He explains that the merchants are neither their enemies nor their allies, and that he only targets those who attack them, not the thugs sent by the Empire. He explains that he needed to use the cart as bait to lure them here and then erase their tracks. The man says female combat slaves are a rare sight. Ryouma remains silent, and the girl says she hates him. He speaks about Lionel. The man explains that young girls are more suited to the bed than the battlefield. He says that he hates him to the depths of his soul. Ryouma says okay. Ryouma orders Sarah to go forward, and Sarah agrees. The man shouts a battle cry. The boy announces that it's time to unleash his anger and calls upon Mother Earth to release giant spears capable of piercing everything. The man reveals the name of the technique, rock bamboo. The woman asks to check for survivors. The woman remains silent. The man asks Masera if he's alive. Masera replies that the number of survivors has been confirmed. The man thanks the young man for his quick work, and the other man addresses him as young man. Ryouma says that his technique was perfect, destroying almost all of them during his first shared use of magic with someone else. The man explains that it's all thanks to the young miss. Ryouma explains that to experience Entuin's magic, he must be the one giving thanks. The man yells, asking if he understands. He reports that from the moment the merchants drew their swords and began to cut down the enemies, it was decided that they could not be their customers, and that they had done nothing wrong. He shouts, expressing indignation. Ryouma explains that they weren't merchants to begin with. He asks why the other man is drawing his sword and explains that he must kill those who attack them. The armored man explains that they are Rhodesiria knights. Ryouma says he wants to silence the other man forever. The guy explains that they always pretend to be heroes, killing many people in cold blood, and calls them the guardians of the kingdom. He says that's what they are. Ryouma asks who they are. The man explains that he's simply a slave trader and was trying to escape the life of a thief by offering to sell slaves at a reasonable price if they spare his life. Ryouma demands to know who they are, specifically addressing the man, saying that he doesn't look like a low-ranking scumbag at all. The guy behind the rubble apologizes for the deception and explains that's why he did it. He says that if that's the case, then he can't complain about what they'll do to him. The man tied up with ropes asks, confused, what's going on? The other man also asks what happened. Ryouma says that he is the captain of the Imperial Guard of Rhodesiria, Mikhail Donitshisan, and asks if that is true. The girl says that the next heir to the Rhodesiria throne that they are looking for is her. The man says his name is Mikhail Donanshu, commander of the Rhodesiria Imperial Guard. The girl explains that she is the next heir to the Rhodesiria throne and the person he was looking for. The man asks her last name, and the girl says it's Rora. Ryouma asks, what's the family name? The man says it's impossible to be a king with an unknown origin. Ryouma says the situation is bad and that the name Malefist can't be used either. He tells her that the girl's last name is Mikoshiba, and her full name is Rora Mikoshiba. He explains that he is her younger brother. The man asks if he is a younger brother. The girl listens. The boy asks if Ryouma is the girl's older brother. Ryouma replies that he is neither her father nor her older brother. The man says he has lost and asks her to kill him quickly. The man asks if this means he'll kill him when necessary. The woman says it depends on the situation and reminds him that the man tried to kill them too. He says he's not going to kill him right now and that they're not enemies, at least. The boy asks what this means and clarifies that he wasn't sent by the nobility, then asks to answer their questions. Ryouma says that's precisely the problem. Ryouma apologizes and says he'll ask his questions later. He says it's just a good luck charm, and the man asks what he's doing. Ryouma says he means no harm and asks for calm. The man asks how he can do that. The man thinks about the twins. Sarah says she's Sarah and will be the first to ask questions, asking if they really are Rhodesiria's Imperial Guards. The girl asks if the attack on the trading group was motivated by a struggle for the throne of Rhodesiria. He asks if the man planned the attack to protect the princess. The man explains that after the sudden death of the king, The princess should be the first in line for the throne. The man also asks. The man in military uniform says the sixth question is whether the nobles used the king's will as a shield to support the second princess. Ryouma says everyone had a hard time answering that question and that he can't be blamed. The girl asks if, in the end, the person they want to kill is her. The man says everything fits. The girl listens. He reports that everything fits. Ryouma says the problem is what happens next. The woman says they were clearly used as bait and deceived, and it would be naive to think that the guildmaster, who tries to appear fair and neutral, would betray them. The man suggests reporting this to the other guild. The girl explains that Fulzard is the largest trading city in Miesta, and that it's difficult to resist the power and might of the guildmaster who governs such cities. He says that even if Val's involvement can be proven, the chances of victory are still slim. He explains that Ryouma says he wanted to ask what was used on Masaru, adding that he doesn't speak about his character, but thought that, as a warrior, he would never open his mouth. The man explains he used a twig, to which the girl clarifies that it was a twig, and the man confirms that he used it. The man explains that for such people, creating wounds is much more effective than anything else, and that he stuck it up his ass. He says, "Heh," and the girl says she'll definitely remember that. The man with the mustache says he won't accept it and definitely won't. The man says the girl is merely a fake sent by the nobility, calling her the true first princess. The man explains that the only legitimate heir to the crown is Lupi-sama. The woman explains that there is nothing in this world that cannot be bought with money, and explains that even if someone cannot buy something directly, one can always find a way to get what they want through intermediaries. The woman says Mikhail. Ryouma says that's correct. Ryouma explains that she's not the previous king's illegitimate child and not a princess, but his companion of clear descent. The girl says she's proof of this because they're twins. The man asks what he means, and Ryouma says. He tells them to calm down and explains that he's trying to piece together the story of that thieving merchant Masaru and the Rhodesyria Knights. The man demands they stop talking nonsense, and he says they thought the same thing. The text explains that a few months ago, after the king's death, the first princess. The woman explains that an illegitimate child with royal blood is not considered anything special. The man explains that the act of preserving royal blood is already justified. The man explains that suddenly an illegitimate child with no previous status was recognized as the rightful heir to the throne. The man reports. The Knights faction, which had always supported the first princess, grew suspicious of the covenant. Princess Lupi's side included knights who specialized in combat but lacked understanding of internal affairs. The nobles faction took advantage of this and grew stronger. As a result, war broke out. Ryouma claims that the illegitimate daughter's characteristics include silver hair and that she's in her mid-teens. The man confirms this is true. Ryouma explains that they believe this and plan to kill the girl. He says that even if such a reckless plan had worked, it wouldn't have solved the root of the problem, and explains that he has no evidence to support this. The man reports that while Ryouma was busy pursuing the illegitimate child, he should have already been safely transported into the country. The woman reports that the noble faction spread false information, and the knight faction fell for it perfectly. The man explains that, in addition to bribing the guildmaster to find the silver-haired teenage girl, they even used a low-ranking adventurer whose death was nothing. The woman reveals that she was the target all along. Ryouma says he initially thought either he or Lionel-san were the target, but he was wrong, and that they couldn't have predicted that Rora would be the princess's replacement. The boy explains that despite knowing about the empty carriage, he's still. The guy says he thinks it's wise to back off at this point, since there was a chance she was disguised. The man explains that everything worked out perfectly, and he can't just back out. He says it's natural to be deceived, especially since he's traveling from Mayas to Rhodes. The man reports that Val's even hired Masaru to secure the knight's support and profit from the nobles. The woman explains that he's a terrible scoundrel, no different from those nobles. Ryouma says there's no point in crying over spilt milk. The woman says the situation is similar to the one he found himself in after being deceived by the nobles. He says they are also in a difficult situation. He asks Mikhail what he has to say about this. Mikhail replies that he cannot. Ryouma says they help each other. The dove announces that the first princess of Rhodesyria, Her Highness Lupis, has arrived and orders everyone to bow to her. The girl announces that she has arrived at the castle to meet the king. Ryouma says that if he loses, he'll die, but if he wins, he can live on. The man explains that there are no rules in this fight and that giving up is not an option. The girl says that everyone must be prepared for any consequences. He reports that he cannot afford to relax. The woman tells everyone to raise their heads. The man and Ryouma are kneeling in front of her. A woman informs Vice Captain Mikhail of the Imperial Guard that she has received reports from Meltina and regrets that he was unable to complete his mission. Both the man and Mikhail react with surprise. He says the situation is dire. It's reported that it's worth turning back time a bit at the campsite. Ryouma says he won't tolerate mockery of a knight's honor. The woman says there are a lot of people in the area, and everyone is staring at them. The man explains it's because they look unusual. The man says they should be careful. Ryouma asks Rora what's wrong with her. Rora explains that Mikhail Dano and Lionel-san are arguing. Mikhail says he did it because he had no other choice. Rora says that Mikhail's honor is worthless if he blindly tried to kill them. Ryouma ponders. A woman says she thinks all knights are just muscular fools and asks if that's true, addressing a man named Bolt. Bolt says he needs to apologize immediately and asks what muscular fool means. The woman explains the meaning of the word muscular. Sarah asks Ryouma what he would do if he were forced to become a slave. Ryouma explains that this describes people who have muscles instead of brains, who tend to act before thinking, meaning those who don't hesitate to do what they want. Sarah says this can be both good and bad. The girl says she'll take it back and won't kill anyone. On the bottom right, a girl makes a sound of delight. There are no speech bubbles in the image, the characters are silent. The woman reports that she received reports from Meltina and regrets that the man was unable to complete his mission. The man thinks the situation is bad. The girl says the word master. Ryouma says to close her mouth when Rora speaks. The woman understands. He asks what her point of view is on this situation. Ryouma says that, to be honest, it looks pretty dangerous, but admits that this knowledge doesn't help them. The woman reports that the princess just used the word mission and explains that it means an assassination attempt on another princess, which would be very bad if it were discovered. She explains that in the worst-case scenario, to cover up the assassination attempt, the princess might kill everyone involved, including them. The woman explains that this failure led to the death of many knights who risked their lives for the kingdom. The man explains that they killed these knights themselves. Another man says that despite this, the captain is still here. The man's thoughts say that Mikhail is one of the few faithful. The woman states that as the princess of this kingdom, she has no choice but to execute her interlocutor. Ryouma says that's what everyone thinks. The man says the same thing. The woman explains that the task was a clever trap from the nobility, so the sentence will be postponed for a while. A crowd of men discuss the situation. The armored man says he'll give them a chance to redeem themselves and asks if they have anything to say. The armored man replies that, of course, they do. The armored man vows not to disappoint his highness. Another man expresses displeasure. The girl speaks, addressing her older sister. The girl explains that in other words it means that he was supposed to be executed but now he is safe. Then the girl says that it is something like this and the other girl says that she understands. Ryouma reveals that she didn't mention the assassination or provide any information about the operation, focusing only on the part where the noble faction's trap caused the knights' deaths. He explains that, given the situation, she put personal gain above the rules, and now he knows she's capable of taking. The woman asks Rora if she is the daughter of King False II of Rhodesyria and asks her to stand up. Rora explains that she is not the king's daughter, confirming the woman's words and revealing that her name is Rora. The boy listens. The woman says it's Rora Malfist, and the girl next to her says it's her sister, Sarah Malfist. The man asks about the Malfists. The woman explains she's heard of them before, in the central continent. The boy addresses the woman as Highness and says, the woman explains that in this world there is only one way to survive, to kill. A girl says she can't swim, but she wants to learn. Another girl explains that if she tries hard enough, she'll definitely be able to. The woman says she sees that they are indeed very similar. The woman says she wants to know more about Ryouma and suggests continuing the conversation another time. She then asks him to enjoy his stay until then. The man looks at the other man. A castle is depicted against the night sky. A decorated vase stands on the table. The woman is smiling. Ryouma says, "What is this, what is this?" The woman says it's an apology for getting him caught up in her country's internal conflict. She says it's truly a valuable item. He explains that he's certain he expressed his intention to join their army. The woman clarifies that he's referring to his desire to join. The woman says she needs more time to think about it. Ryouma asks if that means she's telling them to take it and leave. The woman explains she didn't say that. Ryouma notes that given the current situation, the first princess's chances of winning are 0. At this point, he says that a lowly commoner dares to commit such a daring act and that she shouldn't have been here at all. Meltina takes the sword in her hands. The woman tells Meltina to put the sword away. The woman says it's okay because she still owes the man. Ryouma says no and falls silent. The girl says that the sword is ready. Ryouma says that he will take it. Two girls listen. The woman asks what he said. Ryouma says they could be powerful reinforcements on her side. The woman replies that it's interesting and asks why. Ryouma explains what could bring her victory. The woman states that the girl does not lack self-confidence at all. Then the woman says the word then. Ryouma says he trusts the other person to live up to these words. He asks if he can live up to what he said. The other person replies that he will, of course, demonstrate the merits of this deal. He announces that the decision has been made. The girl with the cup asks Sarah if she listened. Sarah replies that she did. The girl says that, of course, to help the princess win, they will need money. The girl and Ryouma talk, after which the woman says that it is reliable. The woman greets him and asks how things went, and the man in the doorway apologizes for having had a bit to drink. The woman explains that if he hadn't returned in one piece, she would have been dealt with 2, and notes that the royal wine is truly very good. The bearded man says that ni. Ryouma thanks Lionel-san, and Lionel asks him to stop calling him that and says they're comrades. Lionel explains that he doesn't need thanks and that it was his own decision. Ryouma says enough about that. He says he wants to hire mercenaries. The man is surprised by the number 100. He explains that he needs about 100 men, including the Crimson Lion. The man specifies that this will require about 300 gold coins, including supplies, and asks if they are needed immediately. The girl explains that this item can't leave traces, so they need real money. Ryouma says he understands. It's 300 gold coins. He informs her that tomorrow he will instruct Rora to prepare the money and asks her to focus on gathering mercenaries. The woman agrees. The man proposes a toast to their battle tomorrow. Alan Bergston greets Mikoshiba, and Gurnan Zilef says he hasn't had so many guests in a long time and says they're quite nice compared to Mikoshiba. Ryouma expresses bewilderment. The guy with the headband says Meltina arrived before the evening bell. So he won and wants to drink his favorite wine, turning to his brother. The man with the beard says it was quick, turning to Meltina. Meltina demands an explanation and asks how this could have happened. The girl says they're waiting at Count Bergston's residence and asks if they've contacted her on horseback, as it's quicker that way. The man shouts, "What is she doing?" The girl demands to know what this gathering is all about and notices the man holding another glass. The man explains that even the princess gave Mikoshiba an important task. Another man explains that during the succession crisis, they decided to support the princess, to which the first man agrees. The girl says Ryouma reports yeah. The woman reports that not only Count Bergston but also Count Hernan, the 2 leaders of the neutral faction who had rejected their offers, have finally decided to side with them. The woman says they've finally realized their cause is just and are offering to help. The man explains that finally. The man announces the title of the work. The man explains that it's the Chronicles of Volturnia. Ryouma stands with a sword on his back, and a woman next to him talks about the upcoming events. A girl with short hair and a woman with long hair are ready for battle. A man with a mustache and another man with a beard are watching. The girl announces that she's prepared something special this time. The blindfolded man says it sounds interesting. The man on the left explains he's a little nervous. The girls on the right watch the proceedings. The boy says it's too risky and his resolve has wavered. The girl asks why, and explains that Ryomadano misunderstood their responsibility to them, after which he says that they need to show gratitude and respect to the royal family to show them the right path. The man says that what Melt said. Ryouma says the other man is mistaken. The man explains that the two have received requests to assist a noble faction, with the reward being land holdings and ministerial appointments. The woman explains that this is precisely why they are negotiating here, on the condition that Queen Lupis has direct control. In the top right, the girl says that, as knights, she's grateful for this, and the boy clarifies that he just wants to make sure it's not a problem. The girl replies that, of course, it's not a problem. In the top left, the boy says that his military honor demands more than just being on the front lines and explains. The man says his name is Meltina. The woman explains that Meltina wants to use her skills and fight with such dedication alongside the royal family, and suggests that there's nothing more honorable than standing on the front lines for honor. The man explains that they're different, and that's why he's a knight. The top right panel states that this war is also a civil war, and it seems they even reluctantly allowed looting. Ryouma explains that the two will provide post-war rewards under the princess's direct orders, meaning without Kodaram's involvement, and asks if that's okay with them. The bearded man explains that this position is barely connected to them and is based on dubious information, and that he has been excluded from the center of power for about 10 years. He explains that if he remains an observer and keeps quiet, he can become a minister. He says it's too good to be true. The girl reports that the count's slaves and maids insisted on changing her clothes. Ryouma asks who she is. The girl identifies herself as Meltina and says it's her. The woman says she's seriously interested in what kind of training her family's slaves received. He reports that it seems they've been misbehaving towards her and asks her to excuse them. The woman says everything is fine. Ryouma says she wants to talk about an earlier event. Ryouma explains whether a neutral party is being used to create a third force. The woman explains that this resembles the Longzhong plan, where she hails from. The man explains that even with Princess Lupis' support as the next ruler, the situation is complicated by the military leadership's control, making things awkward. The man explains that the difficulty lies in the intervention. Ryouma says that he can therefore trust the princess to secure some power, and asks if this is true, Count. The Count says it is, and says that securing the neutral faction support can be left to him. He says that although this number of soldiers is still not enough, if both counties have a military force of about 2,000 soldiers, he wants another 2,000. Ryouma says that if possible, he'd like to find someone who could match Kodaram. The man explains that if it's someone capable, he has someone in mind. The man greets Jernin and says he's glad to see him. A man expresses his thoughts on Elena Steiner, the previous knight general. He asks if she was part of the royal family, and the man explains that everyone has deep respect for her. He notes that she is a woman and says that she is treated like a noblewoman. The woman says she's heard about the disagreements between Elena and General Kodaram and explains that since the general is on the princess's side, it will be difficult to form an alliance with her. The man says that if she were their ally, she would be a powerful asset, but even so, there will be nobles who will listen. On the outskirts of the kingdom of Rhodesia, at Steiner's residence, a man says the name Elena. The woman informs the girl that she has a guest and asks what she wants her to do. The girl explains that visitors are rare. The man asks Elena to prepare appetizers. Steiner reveals that she is the former commander-in-chief of the night company of the kingdom of Rhodesia. The boy thinks she is an old woman. Meltina says she's honored to meet someone like him today, and that it's the first time she's met someone like him. The man thanks her. The man explains he feels the same way and is glad to meet Meltina, and asks who she is. Ryouma reveals her name as Mikoshiba Ryouma. He says he knows about him and has heard about it. The man explains that there is a mercenary who cleverly charmed the princess. He reports that he is well informed and even in retirement, his light does not fade, as expected of the white goddess of war of Rhodesia. The man explains. The woman asks what's wrong. Ryouma explains that she wants her to help Princess Lupis. The woman explains that she will respond to the knightly order on this matter, says she's not against being frank, but finds it impossible to serve under Kodaram, and asks if Ryouma has heard the rumors. The woman reports that General Kodaram has taken her husband and child hostage. He says that's why he would like her to directly assist the princess. The man asks if he offers to serve as the princess's guard. The woman replies that it would be a great honor, but since she was a knight. Meltina says she's a trusted vassal and knows how much Lupis cares for the country and its people. Ryouma explains that a king's quality isn't determined solely by his personal qualities. He asks whose side Meltina is on and asserts that Elena doesn't seek fame or recognition, but something else. He says he apologizes and asks Meltina to leave him alone with Elena, after which Meltina expresses surprise. Ryouma says not to worry and leave it to him. The man says that's unexpectedly lenient. Ryouma explains that if there are conditions, it's worth mentioning them, but warns that it might not be something he can provide. The man says he wonders if he can explain it to others. The boy says he heard about a terrible conflict between her and General Kodaram, and that her husband and daughter may have been taken hostage. The woman explains that this is what people say, and that her husband was not himself at the time, but that is not the whole story. She explains that the last time they met. A woman says she can't let the man who saved her life die and asks him not to. The man explains that if he dies, she will die too and asks her not to die. The woman says she can't let the man who saved her life die. Ryouma explains that the letter left nearby stated that they had his daughter. He reveals that, despite how easy it was to understand, he had to resign to get his daughter back. Ryouma explains that he had too many enemies, and for a commoner like him, he says there was no evidence, and the girl confirms this. He explains that Kodaram Allenberg is exactly that kind of person. The girl says she only wanted to save her daughter, so she renounced her titles and desperately searched for her. Then a long time passed before the criminal was found. Ryouma remains silent. The man says he wants Ryouma to promise him revenge on Hodder. The man says it must happen right here. Ryouma says he already knows. The woman says that Lupis will be happy about this too, and at first she wasn't sure what would happen. The man reports that the woman has a gloomy expression, and she asks what's wrong. The man explains that despite his best efforts to be friends with Elena, he has a gloomy expression. Ryouma asks if his daughter knows about this. The man says that she was apparently sold and explains that his former subordinate identified her from some information. She was sold to a trafficker specializing in sexual slavery. The man says that this is too cruel and that there was no. The woman says that if she doesn't come back today, she won't be able to tomorrow, and asks her to remember that she has an exam tomorrow. The man explains that he won't be able to come tomorrow because he has an exam. The woman explains that if he doesn't come, he won't be able to pass the exam. The man says he understands. A man says they say a country like China is weak in military power, and so he wants to borrow 30,000 soldiers. The man explains that he has too few troops and the enemies are far away, and asks what he plans to do. The other man replies that these are ordinary soldiers. The girl says it's time. Ryouma apologizes for using her as a pillow for so long. The girl replies there's no need to apologize and explains that even as a combat slave, it's natural for them to comfort their master. The image contains no speech bubbles or text to convey dialogue or narrative. The girl stands on the street and looks back. The text announces the title of the manga, Wertinia, Senki, and Chapter 15 title, Proof of Power. The top right panel shows a bucket filling with water in a well. In the top left panel, a girl lifts the bucket from the well and sighs heavily. In the middle left panel, a man apologizes. In the bottom left panel, the girl tells him he can use her however he wants. In the top right, a girl screams in fear. A man suddenly appears next to her and startles her, saying that her back is open and full of holes. The girl asks the man, named Lionel, not to startle her. He apologizes and explains that he couldn't help himself because she was confused. The woman says she's going to talk to Boltz, as she just returned from recruiting mercenaries. She explains that she's been doing this for a long time and isn't worried, although the knights might be complaining about their training grounds being occupied by mercenaries. The woman says that's the only thing she can do to help the couple right now. The woman reports that the owner said there might be more Rias books in the warehouse, and if it's Sarah, she's running errands. The man asks what happened to the other half and worries if Sarah will be okay alone. The woman replies that she'll be fine and that she's much more decent than she is. The woman reports that, as Ryouma-sama's servant, she was able to handle any request in any situation to the best of her ability. The man asks if this is the boy's instruction. The woman replies in the negative. The girl says it's just like him. The girl says the owner is a kind man, although he is merciless to his enemies, especially to the two of them. The man explains that he also considers the owner kind. The girl asks him not to say strange things, and the man explains that the guy is also good-looking, while all they have left are muscular, balding old men. The guy says he's sorry and asks if he's gone too far. The girl explains that while she wants to be treated like a pet, she doesn't understand what she's saying. The woman listens. Ryouma says the girl made Hao cry. He explains it's a misunderstanding. The girl asks Sarah what happened and if she did anything wrong. Sarah confirms it. The girl reports that there's a problem and the owner will be killed. The man warns that the owner will be killed. The man reports that the ground has split like a spider web. The man with pigtails explains that he no longer needs to attack while the man is sleeping and asks if the man thanks him for his help. Ryouma thanks him for his help. The girl on the right announces that there will be a duel and asks why he must do so. The girl on the left explains that the opponent is an A-rank mercenary and skilled in martial arts. The man says there's no need to rush, he'll be fine, and asks if she's being overly protective. The man reports that rumors are circulating that the inability to use magic is true, and as a result, an F-rank adventurer cannot do anything without his companions. Ryouma says his interlocutor's martial arts are impressive, as always. The man says his interlocutor just now noticed this and advises him not to complain. The man says Ryouma's martial arts will be wasted because he relies too much on strength. Ryouma explains that this will make his nickname cry and asks what his nickname was, Kuro. The man responds with a question. Huh? The man lunges at Ryouma with a. The man says that if he can't win, he will die. Ryouma explains that he doesn't intend to kill. The man and Ryouma begin to fight. He explains that it's a technique well known in Rise and explains that it's a skill. The man asks what happened, and the group of men express surprise. The girl screams that here she is, and another girl calls the master. The man says he won't let her pass. The girl calls him Bolts with surprise. The man says it's a duel between warriors and he won't allow anyone to interfere, even if it's just the two of them. The girl says she can't believe it. Another girl apologizes to Bolts and explains she couldn't stop them. The third girl turns to Lionel and asks. The man says he sees Reyes' skill. Ryouma says that if it's a skill, he knows one too. The man asks to see it and Ryouma agrees. The man explains that this is a useful technique of Rias's called karate. The girl tells the master that she has adopted his specialty. He remains silent, watching the scene unfold. The man stands in a fighting stance, the earth cracking around him. He thinks of a stance made of pine needles. The woman says not to equate her and her grandfather's skills with a man's. The man asks what she's saying. The man strikes. Ryouma punches his opponent in the face, then dodges his attack and delivers a powerful elbow to the opponent's chest. He delivers a powerful blow to the man, causing both to fall to the ground. The man says that this is it, and the crowd shouts the name of Victor and Mikoshiba Ryouma. Ryouma reports that Bolts could have died. The man says he'll take care of the rest. The girl and another girl scream, asking what this means. Ryouma apologizes for lying. The woman says he won against the man with the nickname and asks if that's not a big victory. The woman says they could have gotten rid of him for the man if they had known about the killer. The man explains he knew she would say this, so he kept it a secret. The man with the bags says he also made a big profit thanks to the woman and calls her a cunning woman. The man with the bags says. The woman says she'll tell a secret about herself, explaining that even if she dies, she wants them both to live lives without regrets, as she's been asked to do so many times. The man says the guy has made his decision, although he's worried now. The man explains that he said that if they were interrupted, it would be. The girl says that the two of them are loved, but it's wrong to lie, and that it's not nice to do so, addressing Lionel-san. A man with black hair stands surrounded by other men. The girl says she's a slave and therefore doesn't need to be loved. The man says the name Roar. The man says the word war. Ryouma announces that war is beginning. The girl says she agrees, master. The man reveals that he was an orphan and then explains that because of the events of that day, he became a princess. The woman says her name is Radin Rotsrians, but the truth is who she really is. The girl on the right explains that because of her, this country is beginning to descend into war. The man on the left and two women behind him stare ahead in silence. The woman reports that her grandfather Frank was very concerned and often inquired about Elena-sama's well-being. The woman explains that from now on, she can address her however she pleases. Ryouma says it's someone familiar. The man explains that it's Frank Morrigan's grandson, his right-hand man during the knightly era, and that Morrigan is also a commoner like himself. The man explains that his grandson's skill is top-notch, and if they were with each other now. The white-haired man says that the news of Elena-sama's return has truly had a big impact. The dark-haired man reports that the number of neutral lords who have learned of this and are willing to side with them has increased, keeping them very busy. The man says he's proud to have been recommended by Elena-sama. The woman replies that she was the one recommended by Elena-sama. The man explains that, like Chris Kuhn, he's confident the number of people who join their side will increase. The man laughs and says that's just. Ryouma says the situation is dire. The number of people who have defected has exceeded his expectations, and if things continue as they are, that side's military might will become too great. He explains that if things remain as they are, their faction's power will also become too great and will prompt Kodrum's intervention. The man reports. He informs her that he has no choice but to resolve the military logistics issue as quickly as possible. He explains that they are considered only as an imperial guard directly under the princess's command, and not as a regular army. The woman reports that, unlike General Kodrum, who assembled the military faction, they have limited finances. Ryouma says this is bad and exclaims, "This is bad." The woman says that General Kodrum has betrayed them and joined the noble faction. A man with dark hair and a man with light hair ask what she means and report that Kodrum and Duke Gerhardt of the noble faction are on bad terms. The man reports that he heard that Kodrum's troops are supposed to subdue the bandits this time, but the boy asks if Kodrum's troops really just defected to the noble faction. The woman confirms that troops under General Kodrum's command have definitely entered the noble faction's territory. On the top right, a man scolds Hodrum and says that he thought it was unusual for him to transfer soldiers to the people's side. But now he believes that he is betraying them and acting ungratefully towards Lupi-sama, and also admits that approving the main army to suppress the bandits was a mistake. The woman says that's all for today and suggests holding a war council with Lupi-sama tomorrow morning on this matter. Ryouma says that in the land behind, there's also a similar plan to divide the country into 3 parts or something like that, and thinks it's similar to Sun-Sai's unification. He suggests that perhaps it's worth considering that there's a third force behind all of this. The man says he didn't make them wait long to demonstrate his strategic abilities. He explains that he's actually calm about it and notes that this is expected from someone like Elena. The woman says she'll die when her time comes and that there's no need to panic about it, adding that death will come for her soon anyway. The man says that if he dies this time, it will be a problem for a woman named Elena. The woman explains that the situation has indeed become problematic. The man laughs. The woman says that if this war drags on, their logistical problem will be solved quickly, since they just plundered Kodrum's supplies. Ryouma says that's probably true. He explains that he doesn't think a protracted war is bad for them, but something else frightens him most. The woman asks. He tells Elena that if they win this battle, she can promise him something. The woman at the table asks if he's crazy and is outraged that he wants mercenaries to attack enemy troops. The man explains that the enemy has. Ryouma says the main goal of the strategy is to build a bridge across the Tebe River. The man explains that this will provide an opportunity to take advantage of the situation and build a fortress on the front lines. The boy reports that it's a great blow for them that Kodrum has joined Gerhardt's forces, but for two sides that are at odds. The man says that to cross the river they will build a fortress in the Nile River area, and if they take advantage of the terrain, they will be able to build an impregnable fortress there. The man says this is a brilliant strategy. Turning to him, he responds with a question. The other man explains what he was thinking. Ryouma says he has another plan and asks the princess if she'll let him carry it out. The princess explains that even if the enemy troops are disorganized, they will still thwart their plan. The man explains he doesn't understand anything about war, and the princess decides to go ahead. The woman says that this guy probably already figured out that the princess would hand over command of the army to her when he brought her here. The woman then says that this is truly a brilliant plan, to which the girl responds with surprise and approval. The woman says she approves of the plan, but not because she likes Ryouma or anything like that. The man says the strategy is good for them because if they fail, they'll only lose Ryouma's mercenaries. The woman adds that's all that matters. The woman says that we should try not to die. Ryouma says he understands. The woman says the guy's courage, as always, is admirable. The man explains that he heard the guy has a plan, but doesn't know the details, and asks how exactly they will defend themselves from enemy attacks. The woman explains that, being on the front lines, the guy likes to take risks. Ryouma says he needs both of them to help with the plan. The man asks if he needs help. The girl tells Ryouma that she's finished preparing for the new mercenaries, and he thanks her. Then Ryouma says he's found something again among the new mercenaries, and the girl asks if it's the same again. The girl says yes. Again, the hooded man explains that he can't tell if they are just spies or real assassins. Ryouma says The girl asks if they should be killed. Ryouma says it's better to let them swim for now, as depending on the situation, they could become their trump card in the future. He laughs and says that maybe he should feed them some junk now. The man on the right asks if everything will be okay and expresses concern that they might be attacked in their sleep. He explains that he's not weak enough to die from something like that. The girl remembers and says, the woman announces that she will sleep with Ryouma every night from now on and asks him to give in a little, explaining that this plan will kill two birds with one stone. Ryouma says that's fine. The girl with long blonde hair denies this and asks what kind of bird he plans to kill. Then asks. He says he can't believe it happened. The inscription states that the action takes place outside the royal capital of Zerfels. First, the sound of horses' hooves is heard. Then, Ryouma looks at the large crowd of people in front of him. Finally, Ryouma stands and watches intently. The woman says she'll win. The man explains he won't let her win. Ryouma says he won't give up either. He says it's time to go and calls for action. A group of people behind them raises a battle cry. A few days later, Ryouma and his troops arrived at the southwest bank of the Thebes River. The guy says he'll now lead some troops to scout the area. Ryouma then says thank you and asks to complete the task. The man explains that if they encounter the enemy, they must retreat immediately and asks only to reconnoiter the area. He begs him. The man says he understands the importance of reconnaissance. The man says, okay then. The armored knight bows. Ryouma says let's go. Ryouma explains that Mikhail-san respected him as a commander, even though he's only a rookie, and wonders if that's worthy of a knight protecting the king. Ryouma says everyone will continue training. The man says it's time to begin and orders the first group forward. The boy and the man assure him there won't be any problems if they do everything as they've practiced many times. The man casts a spell, calling on the spirits that rule the land. The man announces that they have received a blessing and orders them to change form, casting the spell, Earth, Dive. Ryouma says that the first team has had enough and suggests taking a 15-minute break, and orders the second team to line up and prepare their magic for battle. The man approaches him and asks how the construction is going. He reports that it looks like they'll somehow make it on schedule. The man says he's truly amazing and compliments him on his good work, asking him to keep up the good work. The man explains that earth magic is useless magic, good only for digging, simple but completely pointless, and that it's difficult to use as offensive magic against moving opponents, and is also easily neutralized with magical items. The man adds that it's considered as if it was used. The man says it's nothing. Ryouma says the young master doesn't seem to fully understand his true value. The man explains that he mentioned this before and asked Lady Sarah to keep a close eye on her. Ryouma asks if it's her, and the man confirms. The woman says she's a woman. He says she does bear a resemblance to the four-eyed Saito he met before, but he also says he feels a strange feeling. Ryouma says that she might be from the Altomia Empire. Ryouma continues that it might be. The guy says they're planning to move soon. The man reports that there's no movement detected at the moment. The man asks about the enemy's numbers. The man explains that there are about 5,000 of them, including 2,000 cavalry. The guy notes that that's a lot. The man is sure the enemy also has scouts, and the boy tells all units to prepare to retreat. The man asks what happened. Ryouma asks Mikhail to wait a minute and explains that the enemy, the general or what he thought was him, is nearby. The man demands the soldier explain what he's trying to say. The man demands to hand over the gun. The guy says yes. The man notices someone and says it's the same person. A man shouts Kyle's name and calls him a bastard. Another man says Kyle's name with surprise. A guy says he's heard the name Kyle and asks if anyone has said that. The man says it's about the traitor Kyle. Another guy asks Mikhail what to do now. Mikhail explains that the answer is obvious. The man tells everyone to retreat and report to Ryomadano. Kyle says they won't let the man go alone and urges him to go, adding that there's no forgiveness for his sin. Another man tries to stop Kyle, asking him to wait. The man with the sword shouts that it's impossible, and the guy tells Mikhail to move forward. The man shouts at Mikhail. The woman asks if something is wrong. Ryouma explains that the defensive fortress is only a short while away from completion and suggests speeding up construction. The man says he thought they'd already made it this far. Ryouma notices someone. The guy says he brings a message, then he asks what happened and if anything happened. The man explains that it is the following. A man with a head wound tells a hooded man that they've likely been destroyed by now. The hooded man reacts. Ryouma asks if this man is one of Mikhail's subordinates and informs him that, if he's not mistaken, his name is different, Ryu. The man reports that they encountered enemy forces and saw Kyle, and that Mikhail-sama rushed to attack the enemy. He asks who Kyle is. The man confirms he saw Kyle. Several soldiers discuss whether he was referring to the traitor Kyle. The boy asks if she's connected to the knights, and the man asks how large the enemy army is. The man reports that the enemy force numbers around 5,000, and the number of pursuing soldiers is unknown. Ryouma listens. Ryouma shouts to Leone, addressing him and another man named Bortz, and orders them to take 400 soldiers each and guard the north and south sides. Bortz announces that he and Laura will take 600 soldiers and defend the center. Leone replies that he understands, and the man apologizes for ignoring the order. He says it's not his fault and that the one who ignored the order is their leader, so he shouldn't feel responsible. The man counters that this is wrong. The man explains that Mikhail-sama initially calmly retreated when ordered. The knight apologizes for failing to dissuade someone and says he's ashamed to call himself a knight. He explains that as a knight protecting Lupi-sama, he's willing to sacrifice his life for him and is certain Mikhail-sama feels the same. The boy says he really wanted to become like Mikhail-sama. Mikhail is silent and makes a sound. The boy explains that even this medal he hasn't received more than one yet. The boy talks about the medal and wonders why it's mentioned if the man is about to die. The girl shakes her head. The man says there's no continuity between the earlier and current stories and suggests he's already dead. The man with the wound on his face calls him Mikoshiba-sama. The guy asks to make Princess Lupis the Queen of Rhodesyria and promises to do so. Ryouma remains silent, and the man shouts Bortz's name. The boy asks if the man has a hoe. The man explains that he can use an earthen shell spell if he needs to dig something up. He says he wants to bury this knight here. Ryouma explains that it's because he's one of their comrades. The girl tells Laura to give her some time and entrusts her with it. The man informs the young master. He says to make Princess Lupis queen, then he says HM. Ryouma remains silent, holding the medallion in her hand. The girl informs Ryouma that the enemy is approaching and that there are 5,000 soldiers 1 kilometer ahead. He says he must survive first before he can do what he thinks about. The man says he doesn't understand what's going on and asks how they could build such a strong fortress in such a short time. The woman says that the war has begun and there is no retreat now, and the girl explains that we need to be strong and stick together. The young man reports that it appears the camp is built along the Nile River, and they have 3 entrances from which to attack. He also believes that attempting to cross the river and outflank them now will be difficult. The man expresses dissatisfaction and asks how he is supposed to carry out Duke Gerhardt's orders under such circumstances. Ryouma asks Kyle what their next move will be. Kyle advises them to prepare for a full-scale frontal assault, explains that according to intelligence, the enemy has approximately 2,000 soldiers, and their forces significantly outnumber that number, and orders them to show the enemy that their time channel won't help them survive. The man screams, making a loud noise, and the man on the right screams with an expression of rage. The man on the left makes a sound similar to a whoop. The boy asks what the other man said. Ryouma explains that those people allowed their soldiers to loot during the Civil War. Ryouma orders his subordinates to follow his orders and hold their position. The man tells them to hold the bowstring. The woman tells them to start now and orders the first squad to open fire. Ryouma says there are only a few enemies and orders them to be destroyed immediately, demanding an attack. The warriors attack and several are wounded by arrows that strike them. The boy announces an attack and orders an advance. The man on horseback says that fools don't want gold. The girl explains that the enemy isn't using formation and their equipment is very poor, and asks if they seriously think they can defeat them with conscripts. The man orders a second. A group of men with clubs and spears runs forward, attacking the wooden fortification. Several jump over sharp stakes set in the ditch in front of the gate. Others climb the wooden bridge to the gate, preparing for the assault. The guy orders the third squad forward and tells them to fight through these bastards. The squad is then shown attacking a wooden fortification. The boy shouts to break through the defenses. The man reports that despite his intelligence indicating their numbers should be several times greater, they still can't break through the defenses, and calls the peasants useless. The man says they won't get anywhere at this rate and suggests retreating to regroup. The man on horseback addresses Kyle Sama. Kyle Sama shouts that they won't have to retreat and asks why they can't overwhelm the enemy with their numbers, calling their opponents useless. The man reports that the resistance at the southern gate is too strong, and in this situation, it's impossible to destroy the fortress without reinforcements. The man orders them not to engage him. The man asks if the nobles consider them fools and says they are responsible for the successful completion of Gerhardt's mission. The husband. The guy says he's going to the front lines and calls on everyone to go together. The guy says their goal is the central gate, and the other guy agrees. The man stands behind the fence. Ryouma says it looks like the enemy has started moving, and the other man confirms this. Ryouma expresses surprise. The man asks if it's normal for knights in this kingdom to make such a risky move, and muses that he expected a retreat, but now wonders if they're about to end up. The man explains that the traitor is a disgrace to the knight who betrayed them and their former comrades who believed in the protection of their lord, Princess Lupis, and that he is simply scum, the worst possible in the history of chivalry. The man explains that a traitor is always arrogant and the boy says that, in general, this man is very cunning. The man says that even after hearing this offensive description, he doesn't seem like a man who likes to impose his will by force. The man explains that this man rejected the master he served for a long time and now stands before them as a general of the enemy forces. Ryouma reports that the strategy is a little ahead of schedule, but they're going to use it because they have guests who can't wait to meet their creator at the main entrance, and it would be rude not to greet them with a bang. Laura asks if it's really okay to use this strategy now since it's originally. The boy informs Kyle that smoke has been spotted coming from the center of the fortress, and says the army has breached the fortress wall and is ordering all troops to attack. Kyle explains that he believes the wall will be breached soon and orders a message to be relayed to all troops. The woman informs them that they won't be able to pass through the gate because it's guarded. Then they see someone quickly descending down the slope. In the top right panel, a group of people are running toward a large wooden gate. Right in the center, a man is shouting at them to hold on a little longer, while on the left, another man is telling them to hold on tight for a little longer. Bottom right, a man in a cloak is explaining how to hold on tight to the crossbar. Down from left, a man shouts, asking what these fools are doing and why they haven't broken through the enemy stronghold yet. A man on horseback explains that the enemy commander looks insolent standing next to the fire and asks if he's the famous mercenary they hired. Ryouma shouts for Lyona and Bortz to be signaled immediately. The man draws his bow and fires a flaming arrow. A man and a woman express surprise. A man and a woman look at an object rising into the sky, leaving a trail behind it. Several people with weapons in hand prepare for action, watching the scene unfold. The man shouts that they are mercenaries from the Red Lion. The woman tells everyone to look at their true power, the one that has guided them all this time. The man calls upon the spirits that rule the land, the dwarf, and announces that they have received a blessing and calls upon the spirits to hear their call and change form. The guy announces the name of the move Double Earth Dive. The man announces the name of the move Double Earth Dive. The boy reports that the water is approaching. The man on horseback warns them not to lose concentration and explains that it won't be long before they break through the defenses. Ryouma says he just heard something. The other man orders them to fight harder if there's time for idle chatter, and calls the interviewer. He reports that water has gushed through the gate and flooded the area. The man watches the scene with alarm. The water continues to rapidly fill the space behind the wall, causing panic among people. Ryouma says that if he can't protect this city, he won't be able to protect those he cares about. He then states that he must do everything in his power to prevent this from happening. He says he's not going to give up and will continue to move forward, despite the difficulties. The man explains that even if the path is difficult, he won't give up and will fight to the end. Ryouma reports that there was once a city in this place, but now only ruins remain. The girl says that the number of people who can swim is indeed small, and notes that this is exactly what Ryouma predicted. Ryouma says that swimming is a skill that can't be mastered without a teacher, and in this world, where it's difficult to make a living unless you're a boatman or a fisherman, there's no real opportunity to learn it. The girl explains that knights also wore armor. Ryouma reports that they've won so far. He says to bury the enemy bodies. The girl asks if that means giving them a decent burial. He explains no, he means that dead bodies could infect the soldiers with diseases. The girl reports that this time everything went smoothly and without incident. The man explains that they can now move on with confidence. In the right column, men are carrying a wounded man with unconscious or dead people lying nearby. In the middle column, a woman removes a bandage from her head and says that the wounded need to be taken to the hospital immediately. In the left column, a close-up of Ryuma's eyes is shown, as he announces that they can't save everyone. The image contains no speech bubbles or text to convey dialogue or monologue. The girl stands in profile with her hands clasped, as if praying or concentrating on something. The caption indicates that this is Chapter 19, titled Assassin. A woman asks if it's really necessary to bury everyone. A man and a boy listen to her. The boy explains that the enemy also attacked them for the same reason and says it's okay to rob the losing side in a war, but the man asks him to stop. The boy says he understands, but adds that they are forbidden from robbing their own comrades. The woman says that this is their job and that there's no benefit in giving in to greed. She explains that if they win the war, their rewards will increase anyway, so there's no reason to steal and be punished now. The boy asks what they think such a man would do to those who break their contract with him. The man says it's an exaggeration and asks them not to exaggerate. The girl explains that Mikoshiba is a martial arts expert, capable of easily defeating an opponent twice his size, and the guy says that they will now continue working. The woman says she's surprised he still dares to show himself to her. The man at the table says he should at least commend him for his courage. The armored man thanks the Lord and apologizes for what happened, and the man at the table asks how he survived. The man explains that the horse he was riding could swim, so when they were swept away by the current, he barely managed to hang on for dear life. Ryouma says this is impressive luck and asks if it's thanks to the horse he borrowed. The man replies that, in any case, The man explains that his report says Kyle abandoned his soldiers and ran away alone, which is very different from what he heard. Kyle says he wouldn't dare do such a thing. The man says he doesn't intend to kill Kyle, but that doesn't mean he'll forgive him. The man says it's unwise to let him go like this, turning to Gerhardt. Gerhardt says their losses won't disappear even if he punishes him, and explains that their forces need to reorganize now, so he plans to wear him down to the limit. The man explains that the arrival of General Hod's troops. The man reports that the enemy is not only skilled in building fortresses, but also determined enough to use a water attack that instantly cost him many soldiers, and ponders where such a person could have come from. The man then explains that this is the other side of Earth, Re-Earth, and decides. The man reports that, as he thought, they did not attack at night. The woman says the enemy has lost many soldiers and will need several days to regroup, and that they need to prepare to meet the main enemy force. Ryouma confirms that otherwise they will have a hard time. The woman adds that they should prepare for this as soon as possible. The man says he thinks this is the right approach. The woman says that this is all that remains. The woman greets him. The man doesn't sense her presence and says that if he remembers correctly, the woman offers to help with this. The woman explains that she is Sarah, a battle slave, and asks if he is a pot merchant known for his violent methods. The girl says that Ryouma was the one who silenced the muscular old men yesterday, and that it was really cool, and also that there aren't many girls her age here, so she was waiting for the opportunity to talk to him. Ryouma explains that he doesn't mind, but he doubts it's a trap and ponders. The woman says the name Sakuya is quite unusual. The man suggests opening a bottle together and celebrating their new friendship. The man says he still has work and can't drink. The man agrees, and the woman says drinking while skipping work is the best option. The man insists that the woman do the same. The guy asks if Sarah will really be okay. Sarah says not to worry. She'll be fine. The man asks if anyone saw his expensive alcohol. The girl turns to Sakuya and asks if she's okay. Sakuya replies that she's not feeling well. The man asks Sarah if she knows. The woman asks if there's a problem with the merchants, and the man replies that there isn't. The woman notices the sudden cry of crows and is surprised. The man explains that their cries signal the onset of night. The man says it's time to end their break and return to their business, as it's almost dark. The woman uncaps the bottle and pours out the liquid. The woman says there's no protection. The woman takes out a sword and sits down by the tent, peering inside. The woman strikes downwards with her sword. The woman says that this is. A woman screams. A man strikes her, and she reacts with a sound of pain. The man grabs the woman's arm, and she tries to fight him off, but his blow is deflected by her sword. The man expresses dissatisfaction, and the woman declares it's a dead end. The girl says it's a shadow clone technique. The man says no. The guy explains they're twins. A young man greets a girl named Sakuya and says he's glad to see her on this beautiful night. The man says they can finally talk now. Sakuya asks if he's confusing conversation with torture. The man is surprised and asks if she said the word shinobi. Sakuya explains. The woman says it's dirty and asks him to look here. Ryouma says that was a tricky question and asks what's going on. The woman explains that he already has 2 slaves, but is still not satisfied, and points to his body. The girl warns him not to rush the magic. The woman orders. He explains that one of the main reasons for his capture is his personal interest in the woman he's talking to. The girl says he's going to defile her, but immediately denies it. He says it's because of this blade. The girl asks if it's her blade, and he asks if she's using it. Ryouma says that maybe she's Japanese too. The girl asks if he's Japanese too. Ryouma says the word yappa, and then the girl finishes it with the word niece. He says he doesn't understand what he's talking about, and the girl asks what that even means. Ryouma says he doesn't understand. The guy explains that the woman has black hair and black eyes, her skin is slightly tanned, but about the same tone as his, and that she is the assassin who tried to attack him in his dream, calling herself a shinobi and using a katana named Sakuya. The man asks the woman what she means by. The woman says they're unlucky, as they've never ventured beyond the Western continent, as far as she knows. Ryouma asks where she got the Japanese blade. The woman explains that this katana is a weapon passed down in her clan from generation to generation since ancient times. The man says that they are a clan of wanderers and that this is the fate of their clan. The woman says her grandfather is here and asks why he's here. The old man explains he's there as insurance. The woman is surprised and asks why. Ryouma asks her to calm down and just stay out of it for now. The old man notices that Ryouma doesn't seem particularly surprised by his appearance. The old man says that the person he's talking to is either a fool who doesn't understand the situation or an important person who doesn't care about what's going on. He explains that he doesn't remember inviting the old man here and says he was quite surprised. He calls the old man a young man and asks why he didn't kill him. The man says he came from Re-Earth and most likely from the same country as the other man's clan. The man explains that in his era, that country was called Japan. The man says he heard that the modern Hinamoto people have forgotten how to fight and have become cowardly. The man asks how long the girl intends to remain surprised and orders her to stand up. The man tells the girl to take off her clothes, to which she shyly agrees. The girl clarifies what he means by this, and the man sternly demands no objections. The boy demands an explanation for what the man is doing and says it's been 3 days since the order was given. And despite the losses, 60,000 soldiers are supposed to be ready. The man in the water asks if the army's reorganization is complete and apologizes for the difficulties that have arisen, which have proven greater than expected. The boy reports. The man in the water says they've been unable to recruit any peasants in the area and demands an explanation for this situation. The white-haired man says he doesn't know where the information leaked from, but rumors of the ongoing battle have become a hot topic among the peasants, and this seems to be the reason for their defeat. A man asks why bad things keep happening to him. The man says it's impossible and asks if this man is connected to the devil. The man screams. The man explains the technique of IAI. The man explains that it's something more primitive than modern IAI and says that. The woman says she knew she was hit in vital points and notes that the marks from the blows are quite small. The man asks if the other man used the spearhand technique. The man with black hair explains that he used his fists, not regular punches. Ryouma says that the girl, despite her appearance, will become the future leader of their clan, and notes the boy's impressive skills. The boy agrees to answer questions if he can, but first asks to confirm that the boy's clan is the descendants of a man summoned into this world about 500 years ago. The man confirms. The older man explains that in their ancestor's case, he was summoned into this world along with the entire village, but it seems that such mass summonings are no longer practiced, and only a few people can be summoned per year. He says that the chance is then about 1 in 750 million, and speculates that in that case he too. Ryouma says that a clan full of assassins has chosen this way of working. The man explains that every member of their clan is a rappa, an archaic term for ninja. Ryouma asks why, then, their clan had to become nomadic since ninja usually settle at a local castle. He apologizes and says he was rude to him. Genu calls him a smart young man, tells him his name is Igasaki Genu, and says he loves him. He suggests they get along from now on. The man asks what he means and says the reason he. The man explains that Rappa, who failed the mission, was destined to die, and asks if Sakuya has any complaints. He says Mikoshiba made every effort to spare her life, and it's only logical to use that life to serve him. Sakuya says. The woman asks the elder if he's truly happy with this, and the elder replies that he should be, explaining that it's only a possibility for now, but perhaps their clan's days of wandering will soon be over. A week later, the girl asks Ryouma if these people can truly be trusted, and Ryouma asks if he's telling. The girl says they'll never know when they'll be betrayed, and reminds them that they were assassins who came to take Ryuma's life. Ryouma says he's not happy about it. He says he's been thinking about it too and had planned to let them swim from the start, though it's a bit of a schedule disruption, but it's not a big deal. The girl remarks that he's actually succumbed to the katana's influence, to which he replies that's not entirely true and explains that the katana was given to him as a gift. The woman reports that the Rhodesiria Knights have finally arrived. The woman turns to Ryouma, saying she wants capable people who are good at espionage, and this is her reason, and also asks him not to let his guard down. Ryouma explains that if this decision is made after careful consideration, The man says he apologizes for the wait and addresses him by name. Ryouma says it might be time to fulfill their promise. The man says that he heard the name Kodramdono correctly. The man with the beard says that, in short, that's exactly it, and explains that the last battle proved that leaving command in the hands of another man would prevent them from winning battles that should have been easy for them. The man with long hair explains that this is the transfer of all military authority to another man. The man shouts at him, calling him a scoundrel and a runaway general, and asks who he is. The man explains that, despite holding a war council after hearing of Korm's great idea, he is outraged that he dared to bring about defeat from the last clash. The man explains that when others try to cross him, he cuts them down first, and that's how he's lived up to now, so he offers to be a good boy and let him dry him off. The man explains that the little rat only has about 2,000 men under his command, while he has over 20,000, although they're still reorganizing. The man explains that he said that the army's authority should be completely transferred to General Kodram, and rephrases this, asking if he wasn't clear enough. The man continues that he is currently the one entrusted with the army, and that he has lost. He explains that the only logical way to win is to. A man says he's really so surprised that he's on General Kodram's side. Another man says he can't believe it. The bearded man looks at the first man. A man says he suffered a major defeat in the last clash and is willing to take full blame for it, but he refuses to remain silent, feeling ashamed as a knight. Another man asks if he feels shame and what exactly he means. Ryouma says the other man doesn't understand. He's not a king and has no interest in martial arts, but simply sat in a comfortable chair and shamed knights with his sword, playing with his life. The man says it seems the other man doesn't even realize that his actions back then were the greatest. The man laughs and says he's honored to be so valued by Caldano. The man with short blonde hair explains that if this is the best path to victory, he can't help but agree. The man with long blonde hair is surprised that even he agrees. The man with short blonde hair. The man explains that the Gerhardt family is proud and noble, and asks why he must be treated this way by these ill-mannered bastards. He explains how other nobles could agree with these snakes, calling it almost a coup d'état. The man wonders why there's no one around him. The man asks to raise his head, after which the man in the military uniform begins to plead for help, saying he has no one else to turn to. The man in the military uniform identifies himself as Duke Gerhardt and states that his country has ordered the civil war to be extended for at least 6 months. But the situation is clearly dire. The man explains that once fear takes root in people's hearts, it won't be easy to get rid of it. And this proves that their enemy is a very clever man. Another man explains that this isn't just one trap set for them and asks what they should do, wondering if the first is suggesting warning Hod. Ryouma says there will be a decisive battle on the plains. Looking over a field of wheat, the man explains that a decisive battle in these fields will exhaust the kingdom's resources, making it difficult to calculate taxes next year. He also notes that the enemy may not understand this, as they allow their citizens to be robbed during the civil war. The woman explains. The man greets Elena, calls out to her, then asks Chris to hold the sword for a while, to which Chris agrees with surprise. The man jumps down, shouting Elena's name. The man explains that he is a dark knight who will send this world into the void and, in the end, will be faithful himself. Ryouma says he's not too enthusiastic and explains that it's not all that impressive. The man says it's truly an impressive fortress, built in a short time, and he's sure Her Highness will be delighted when she sees it. Ryouma points out that the woman missed that, and the man says the situation is very bad. He asks because the princess will begin to doubt his loyalty. The man explains that Her Grace is not so doubtful. He simply explains that Mikhail is a very loyal knight who has served Her Grace since childhood. The woman says she understands. The man with long hair says he does. The man with long hair calls the woman Lupi-sama. Meltina thanks Elena for her report and asks for some time alone this evening. Elena tries to object, but Meltina insists and asks for it. Meltina then sits down on the bed, and Elena leaves, talking to the guards. The woman tells Mikhail that she's begging him to stay alive. The girl begs Mikhail to stay alive. The man says she seems deeply sad and calls her Princess Lupis. The woman reacts sharply and asks who's there. The man reports that, thanks to his technology, everyone in the fortress has now been sent to Dreamland, making any attempts to defend themselves futile, and warns of a possible threat to Mikhail's life. The girl exclaims about the appearance of a killer and calls for security, then expresses surprise that Mikhail is alive and asks what she's doing. The woman says that, depending on the situation, she may no longer guarantee Mikhail Dano's life. The man says that now everything depends on Her Highness's response. The woman is surprised and asks if Mikhail is still alive. The girl says she first wants to know who he is and asks if he is threatening her. The woman asks how the man got into this tent unnoticed. Sudo Akatake apologizes for the late introduction and gives his name. Ryouma says he can be considered a lowly contact for a certain person. The man explains that the commander of Mikoshiba's army swam across a large river, floating downstream on the river Thebes, submerging his back in the water, which was quite difficult for him, an old man. The woman explains that thanks to him, the old man was forced to swim a long distance, and wonders why. The girl asks what the man's goal is, if he's gone so far for it. The man explains that he works for Duke Gerhardt and asks him to stop joking and get down to business. He explains that the situation is actually a bit different and asks if he can borrow a chair. The man explains that his legs are already broken. The man announces that Duke Gerhardt is about to swear allegiance to Princess Lupis. Princess Lupis asks, "Swear allegiance?" and expresses confusion about the word oath. The man explains that he is a duke. Princess Lupis says that the man must. The man says that Mikhail's life is also important to him and asks how many people he can absolutely trust in his camp now. The man warns that it was very dangerous and cruel to attack without warning, even if he was an intruder. The man notes that it is a rare item, a chakram, and suggests. The man says it was Ryouma and asks if it was him. The man then explains that he's being ignored and asks to come out already because he looks like a fool talking to himself. The girl is confused, and the man calls her and says he's taking her, addressing her as higher. The woman asks for forgiveness, promising to correct the mistake later. The man reports that Her Highness has regained consciousness and calls Mikoshiba, who confirms her readiness to act and orders the attack to begin. Several people with torches prepare to act. The man stands in front of the burning building. The woman pleads. The man says they're being too cruel to him, asking for a break and noting that they burned his best clothes. Ryouma asks if he's really human and notes that he's finally spoken. The man replies that he's glad he did and tries to speak again, but Ryouma remains silent. The man says he can't afford to fight now and asks to postpone the fight until later due to the vast difference in weapon quality. He says the man completely ignores his words. The man tries to stop him, but he continues to attack. The guy explains that the top stance is called the Shinkiage-style fire stance and says it's bad. He can't afford to die here. The man laughs and says that it really is bad. The girl asks Mikoshiba to wait. Ryouma says there's no reason to wait. The girl says she'll explain everything and asks him to put down his sword. The man says it's terrible. The man reveals that Duke Gerhardt has decided to pledge allegiance to Princess Lupis, and to show his sincerity, he plans to bring back Michael Banadono, who is currently under protection in Heraklion, but this depends on whether he can return safely. He and the two men react to this. The man explains that they were simply acting according to the late king's will and had no intention of rebelling, and that everything was planned solely by Kodrum. Ryouma considers it absurd to blame Kodrum for everything just to save herself and accept this as justification in exchange for the life of one knight. The woman informs Elena that she has many years ahead of her and explains that there's no need to antagonize Her Highness in this place. The man warns Elena against doing so. The woman explains that accepting his oath also means the second princess will take the stage. The woman reveals that Mikhail is also a general in this army and must have known the fate of the general of the losing army, and is certain he would not approve of his life being exchanged for chaos in the kingdom of Rhodsyria. She orders Sudo to immediately inform Mikhail to commit suicide on the spot. The girl says that if Mikhail Banis becomes the king of this kingdom, the woman says that, in that case, saving the king of this kingdom is the highest priority. Ryouma says to wait a minute, Your Highness, and asks him to forget everything he said. The woman explains that even if it's just a guess, It's too much. Ryouma says he's right and asks a question. The woman thanks Elena for her advice and says she believes her opinion is correct from a knight's perspective, but she can't accept it. The woman explains that this way they won't have to fight Duke Gerhardt, which will result in fewer losses on both sides. The man says that for him, Mika. Ryouma says that, if possible, he too thinks that accepting Duke Gerhardt's oath as proposed by Sudodano is a good idea. However, he believes that the Duke should renounce his court title and pay compensation as an absolute condition, and should also be prohibited from holding a position under. He says it's a small price to pay compared to his life. The man is silent, then says it very well and laughs. The woman explains that if they continue to fight them, they will lose the barn, but if they choose the other option, the kingdom's power will be divided, and eventually other countries will have a chance to invade. The man. Ryouma says, "Give the order, Your Highness." The woman takes a deep breath and announces forward. The man and the boy look at the cavalry. The man announces that war is beginning and warns that the devil who killed everyone at the Tibi River is coming here and will spare no one, nobles, commoners, or women and children. The girl on horseback orders all forces to advance, heading toward Neralian and aiming at. Ryouma says they are completely outnumbered, and therefore there is no reason to join the attack on Heraklion. He explains that Sudu forced the nobles to abandon the alliance using news of Duke Gerhardt's loyalty, and so only Hodrum's direct subordinates and those who, according to the merchant who left Kodrum's residence, Kodrum bought a large quantity of clothing and land titles from him. He used gold coins. He says Kodrum is trying to quickly cash these coins. The man explains that he is most likely trying to raise more funds because the woman explains that he also appears to have purchased a lot of canned goods, such as pickles and other long-lasting items. Ryouma reacts with surprise. He says that usually in the army there is a special unit responsible for providing soldiers with rations. The girl asks what he means. He asks if he's sure these aren't just regular rations for soldiers. The man sighs and says that it seems he really is a scoundrel, as Elena said. The man says he's talking about the supply unit. The man explains that there's no compelling reason why the Supreme Commander should personally purchase food. Elena explains that whoever called the merchants at the private residence and exchanged money and canned goods with them is trying to flee the country alone, and will likely do so when attention is focused on Heraklion. Ryouma asks why Elena is here and whether she should accompany. A woman says she's feeling unwell. The man says it's completely fake and asks if she's really allowed to do this. The woman explains that these are the old special privileges of ladies. He yells at her for lying. The man laughs and asks her to stop. The man asks Elena if she knows which direction Kodrum plans to flee and says he can narrow it down to 4 directions: southeast, south, southwest, or west. The girl says Kodrum has no way to go inside the kingdom. Ryouma explains. The man explains that if it's the outside, it should be the west. He asks why he thinks so. The soldier reports that he doesn't see anyone at the moment. The man asks Kyle if he's sure there are no pursuers. Kyle confirms this, addressing the man as Your Excellency. The man says that his decision to retreat at that moment turned out to be the right one, as no one seems to have noticed. The man says he won't tolerate this quietly and will definitely take revenge 100-fold for being treated like a fool. He says he felt sorry for Elena and allowed her to live because she said she was going to quietly retire, but she turned out to be a traitor. The man explains. A knight inquires about the welfare of General Kodrum's family and asks if there are any problems with them. Another knight reports that they are doing everything possible to ensure their comfort in the carriage, especially the general's daughter. The man explains that these two are his last trump cards and orders them to be taken care of. He tells. The man approaches Ryouma, informing him that they will resume their journey at sunrise and asking him to rest while he can. Ryouma apologizes and explains that he can't resist drinking. The man in the hat calls Ryouma by his first name, Kyle, and offers him a drink to cheer himself up. A young man announces that a raid is underway and an enemy attack is approaching. The man shouts for Hodrum-sama, and Hodrum replies that he knows and that they need to leave this place immediately. The man orders them to go, and the other man agrees. The man informs them that the mountain path to Zeradia should be safe from fire, and he will try to hold off the enemies so that Hodrum-sama can use this time to escape, urging them to hurry. The man leaves the others in Kyle's care. The girl and boy wish the man luck. A young man announces he's found the general. A woman screams that his head is hers. The man looks forward with a determined expression. The man tells her that she's unusually agile for a simple bandit and asks if she's a bandit. He casts a spell, calling on the thunder spirits to hear him and aid him, offering his blood as a sacrifice and asking them to show their true strength and uphold his oath. The girl asks if they caught him. The man shouts that his enchanted anti-magic armor and shield make their weak magic useless. The man explains that it's a combination of enchantment and enhancement magic. The girl says he's not going to give up without a fight, and the man says he doesn't understand, and Ryouma says he doesn't know. He asks if Lion can continue, to which he replies that he slightly twisted his ankle. He asks to join Laura and destroy the remaining enemies, ordering that no one be left alive. The man warns the young master to be careful, as the enemy is using magic. The old man asks to end the civil war and leave this place to them. The man replies that he understands, and Ryouma agrees. The man muses that perhaps this battle is a great risk for Kyle to survive in this cruel world. The man says that his magical tower shield is unrivaled under the heavens, and that Ryouma's small sword will never be able to pierce it, ordering Ryouma to fly away with his flimsy sword. Ryouma remarks that the man is very agile despite his heavy armor and his swordsmanship. The woman explains to Ryouma that he shouldn't just swing the sword, but should think of the blade as part of his body, and advises him to forget everything and focus on what's in front of him. Ryouma shouts and attacks. The man says he parries the attack with his shield and then counters. Ryouma strikes his sword, impaling his opponent, who screams in pain. The man looks at the wound in surprise. The man says it's impossible and asks how he was able to cut his shield in half with just his strength. He explains that he used gravity to offset his physical strength and let the momentum carry his blade, a combat skill from Re-Earth. The man says he never expected to hear those words from anyone other than Mikhail, calling it overconfidence. Ryouma remains silent, then reveals that it was the man who tried to set the same trap for Mikhail. The man remains silent. Ryouma explains that it was actually the man's fault. The girl says it's all very simple. He says the same thing. The knight asks permission to fulfill his final wish, to die as a proud knight, and offers to become his opponent, appealing to Heraclion the devil. Ryouma agrees, after which the knight thanks him and says he is now in his debt. Then the battle begins. The knight charges swiftly, but the man reports that everything went according to plan. Now all that's left is to capture Kodrum and cut off his head, and notes that Ryouma's guy really did an amazing job and is also an excellent commander. The woman confirms this and explains that the plan to intentionally leak information to the enemy to drive them into a corner was quite G. The young man reports that they've captured Kodru, then clarifies that they've captured General Aliberg. The man orders the general's wife and daughter to be taken away, and the soldier confirms the order. The girl screams for her father, and the woman next to her is also worried. The man addresses the general, calling him a community girl. The man explains that he now has the right to be tried by law since he surrendered, and demands to be returned to where Princess Lupi's ISI is, adding that Gerhardt deceived him. The boy accuses the man of lacking shame as a general and calls him a bastard. The man says time has clearly taken its toll on Elena, and she's changed greatly. Though she was once slightly more beautiful than any random servant he might have encountered when they were both fighting for common ground. He's heard that many of his soldiers defected to Elena's side during the war, and remarks that, top right, a man tells General Kodrum that he counted on her ladyship's compassion from the start and knew he could extend his life if he received a fair trial, and wonders how far this scoundrel has gone. Top left, a man tells General Kodrum that his decision. The man shouts that Elena is crazy and is about to break the kingdom's laws. Elena confirms this and says she will give the man the sword as a token of gratitude for not killing her. The man calls Elena dirty and ironic, and she replies that he finds it ridiculous to even think that. The man tells her not to worry and says he'll send his wife and daughter to him and will be there personally right after he's finished with him. The woman says she'll accompany him, of course. The man asks for mercy for his wife and daughter, but the woman interrupts him. The man, in a panic, calls out. The man announces that it's finally over and turns to Celia. The guy asks if he can ask for one small favor. The girl says she's sorry, but it seems she won't be able to fulfill her promise. The man with long hair says Ryouma, then he calls her Chris. The man reports that Kodrum's wife and daughter were eliminated because the sin of ending the general's line must fall on him. The man explains that Kodrum's family, who attempted to escape with him, perished when they attempted to attack the knights pursuing them. The man tells Elena that she successfully. The woman says she can't believe what's happening. The man calls her Highness. The woman reports that Heracleon is practically abandoned. The man explains that the only remaining mercenaries are those who didn't manage to escape, a few people who ran the place and a handful of nobles. The man on horseback says he believes they can quickly suppress their enemies and end the civil war once and for all. The woman says this must be their lucky day and is surprised they managed to end it without casualties. The girl explains that she understands. The girl wonders. The text states that upon leaving, a slight unpleasant aftertaste remains in the winner's mouth. On stage, Ryouma explains that there are different creatures in this world, each with unique abilities and roles. He says that together they can overcome any difficulties and defeat enemies. The man says rumors about Mikoshiba are spreading beyond their country's borders, along with fear of him, and that he probably doesn't like it, but it's better to be known for something than not known at all. The woman says that continuing to use the demon Araquilin will strengthen their nation. The boy asks how Meltina's knighthood registration is going. The girl explains that most nobles and commoners are against Mikoshiba's treatment, and if Mikhail were on their side, they could silence the dissent, but he's currently under house arrest. The man explains that appointing someone without a clear identity as Minister of Defense will impact the positions that need to be filled because of the war. He explains that even if they could be given something to keep them in the country, and even assuming that was possible, the man with the fringe between his eyes. The woman explains that he uses his strength and charisma to assemble a small army of mercenaries and assassins, and currently has over 500 loyal followers. The girl explains that it's quite comforting to have him on their side. But if he decides to take over even with a 1 in a million chance. The man says that if he asks her to kill Mikoshiba, Ryouma says the same thing, adding a hesitant, The woman announces that in Rosalia's name, she is granting the title of Baron and declaring that the man will rule the Vortinia Peninsula. The man, surprised, repeats that he is a baron and asks what that means to him. Several men whisper, expressing bewilderment at what's happening. The woman says that if they don't stop it now, it will be too late. The man explains that they can't afford to lose. The man says there are no hard feelings, but he's also feeling uncomfortable, so he'll have to stay in the cage for a while. Ryouma thinks the queen has captured him. The man in the cloak says he's surprised, noting that Ryouma has improved compared to Han Exian, and asks if there was a way to refuse the offer. The man with short hair explains that the land is large, but he's heard bad things about this place. Ryouma says he now understands how he felt. Ryouma says he wouldn't want the woman to lose face there and thanks her. The woman tells him that in return, she needs to fulfill a promise to him. She draws her sword and explains that she must keep her promise. Ryouma explains that she promised him that after the war ended, they would duel. The woman says he must learn, since he's a nobleman now. He says he didn't ask for this, but if he loses, he asks her to take care of them. The woman remarks that this is his fire stance. The blonde man says that he shouldn't actually put away his sword. Ryouma objects, reminding him of the promise he made. The blonde man explains that it was all a ruse to ensure he wouldn't commit suicide. Ryouma asks him to stop. The blonde man admits defeat. The woman says she'll behave and asks to borrow her for a minute. He asks what's going on. The girl asks him to take it slow and calm down. The woman says she's calm. The girl says she had a dream. On the top right, a man says he wants to hold his child in his arms and show that child the world he protects. On the bottom right, a man explains that he doesn't consider himself young enough to be considered a child. On the bottom left, a man asks in amazement if that's really true and repeats the question. Next, the woman says that if her parents were around, she would want to fulfill their will. The man says that this land, despite all the difficulties it will face, will be overcome, and he believes this. The man admits defeat and declares the woman victorious. The woman orders her son to move forward. The man asks if Tachibana-san plans to go again. Ryouma says that if they're not home, everything will be for nothing and suggests they just keep coming back as long as necessary. The man explains that they were very cooperative during the interrogation and doesn't see anything suspicious about this family. Mikoshiba says it's too suspicious to leave no trace and vanish as if they simply vanished. The man says they need to go back to the beginning and investigate everything again, no matter how many times it takes. The map and the text explain that the Vortinia Peninsula, although technically part of the R. The top right says it's a wild land where monsters and demi-humans behave as they please, and pirates roam freely and live off the coastal lands. The top right man explains that this is Vortinia. The bottom left man says it looks like. The woman says she can't believe they were involved in the Rhodesiria Civil War and asks what the odds are. The bespectacled man says they've indeed caused them a lot of trouble. The bearded man explains that the criminal who killed Geis Walkland is the head of the. The woman explains that they had to absorb 3 kingdoms, maintaining a balance of power between Ernescula in the north and Kiltantia in the west, and that this was the only way for the Altmare Empire to take over the world. The man with glasses explains that the enemy not only killed Geis. The man says he's surprised he accepted the mission in Vortinia, as it looks like a promotion, but is actually a way to get rid of him. The man explains that added the requirement at the last minute before accepting the deal. The man says he's quite an idiosyncratic person. Ryouma says he's honored to receive it. The man says this is absurd. He demanded almost all of Rotsinia's income, and even they couldn't pay that amount in a single transaction. Then the man explains that it was a tactic to first make an outrageous demand, then appear concessive and offer a reasonable term, which is exactly what he was after. Ryouma reports that 5,000 gold coins are roughly equivalent to 500 million yen and can't believe it. He asks if Queen Lupis has accepted the deal. The man explains that even a barony is a great deal for him, and if she accepts, he'll practically become a duke. The man explains that it's a lawless wasteland with no hope of tax revenue, and even a capable man like himself won't be able to accomplish much for several years. The man adds that Rhodesiria won't be able to send reinforcements to Zeruda while they're carrying such a bomb. The man says. The woman reports that, according to the original plan, the Altmare Empire will invade the kingdom of Zeruda. She looks out the window watching the birds and falling feathers. The boy asks the man if he's worried about Mikoshiba Ryouma. The man explains that it's been a month and a half since he left the capital, and if all went well, he should be at Fort Ippolos, at the entrance to Vortinia. The man explains that it's Her Majesty's decision. The man reports that the situation isn't getting any better and may even be getting worse, going from a duke to a viscount. The man remains silent, looking at the other man. The man says that when Mikoshiba Ryouma sees Vortinia with her own eyes, he'll definitely hate them. Ryouma asks if the queen has made an enemy. The man explains that it sounds funny, and if the time comes, he'll destroy it. Ryouma calls her that. The man then hopes. The girl says he has a cold and asks him to be patient for a while, explaining that after they pass this ridge, they will be in Ippolos. The man says his butt hurts. He laughs and says he can't say that because he's a baron now and that the family hero. The girl explains that the sword symbolizes strength, the snake cunning and knowledge, and that this crest represents Ryouma himself. She asks Ryouma to stand up straight and act like a nobleman. Ryouma agrees, and the man notices that for the first time the girl is acting stern. The girl says that in exchange, she'll definitely smear the medicine on Ryouma's buttocks when they get to the hotel. The girl yells that it's unfair and that she can't keep Ryouma's buttocks all to herself. The man, with his eyes closed, says that his concern for Ryouma is growing. The man with black hair. The man explains that this fortress is the closest town to the Vortinia Peninsula. Detailed information about the peninsula can be obtained here, so they should rest and prepare. The girl asks if she can take a bath, and the man replies, "Of course." Ryouma says the fortress wall is impressive. The man explains. The top right girl says the warmth penetrates deep into her body, while the other girl says she finds it very pleasant. The bottom right depicts the streets of the fortified city of Ippolos. The bottom left shows food on a table. Ryouma says it's suicide. The man explains that there are only 30 people, including all of the Red Lions, and governing the undeveloped territory will be impossible. The girl reports that the mercenaries who fought with them in the war dispersed in all directions after the battle, and suggests that. He says it's not enough to have just a team of fighters. He wants people who can gather and process intelligence, who also know the terrain, who can obtain equipment, and who can establish trade routes for food. The girl suggests that she and her sister explore the markets in search of traders. He asks. The woman advises that they should try to recruit about 200 of the best they can find, but the contract is only for a year, and suggests mentioning that there might be an opportunity to be hired as a full-fledged knight in the future. Ryouma explains that there won't be any income for a while, so that's the limit for now, and ponders everything. He says that's exactly it. The man says that then it's time to take a break and rest tonight. He's counting on them. 3 girls stand in the hallway. Ryouma asks if he understood correctly that Jen is here and wants to know why Jen stayed so far away from them. Jen confirms this and explains that he wants to stop constantly testing each other. Ryouma believes he deserves to know the reason. Jen remains silent. In the top right, the man says he's confident the other person has a good reason and won't ask about it now. In the top left, the man says he wants to hire the other person's clan and asks if they're available. In the center right, the older man explains that he's talking about the clan. In the left, Ryouma says he's willing to exchange favors. He then suggests they move on to business. The man calls Ryouma an interesting person and wonders how he achieved such resilience. The man says it's been more than 6 months since she disappeared and asks if they found anything. The girl says they've been talking for a while and mentions Ryouma's name. The man asks for 2 officers to be brought to the door. The girl asks what happened, turning to her grandfather. The man says everything is fine. The man apologizes for interrupting the training and thanks him for his cooperation. The girl responds in the affirmative. The boy calls out the girl's name, and she responds. A man asks to come here. A girl says he's cute. The man tells Tachibana-san. The man explains that he looks like the killer he met in Hong Kong, and they're similar. Another man says this story has been repeated too often. Tachibana explains that he's too stupid. Ryouma asks his father to take care of him. The man notices an insect in his cup and asks if it's a beetle. He hears Uki and Kikuki crying and is surprised, asking if they're asking him to take them away. The man reports that he does not feel the presence of Asuka and the police, explains that this cannot be, and recalls the vibration, just like when he was swallowed earlier. The man says this can't be true and asks if this is his punishment. He understands that someone wants to take Asuka away from him. The man explains that when he was consumed by that world, he did everything he could, fought, and miraculously managed to return home. After countless sacrifices and miracles, the man says that now he is trying to take Asuka too. The man explains that when his son was taken away, he imbued Ryouma with all the martial arts and knowledge he could so that he could survive if he ever ended up in that world because of him. The man explains that Asuka is different. She's just an ordinary girl. The man apologizes to his younger sister. The girl asks where she is. The woman explains that they are travelers from another world and greets them, offering a sincere and heartfelt greeting to everyone present. The girl confirms that this greeting comes from the heart. The woman says it's a blonde with very white skin. The girl says they seem to be able to communicate. The man explains she's not Japanese and notes her clothing. The man says he's a Japanese police officer and asks if anyone speaks Japanese. The woman explains that the man is speaking English, introducing himself as a Japanese police officer, and is trying to ask who they are and where they are. The man wonders who these people are. The woman says that language standardization is for the girl. The boy reports that they were at the entrance to the house and asks where they came from, simultaneously thinking what the woman is saying. The man demands answers to their questions and points to the badge. The girl flinches, and the armored man brandishes a sword. The guy tells her to put the item down and says he doesn't know if the other guy is filming anything. Ryouma exclaims. The girl yells at the detective that the gun is real. The man is surprised and asks what it is. The man gets hit and makes a sound of pain. The girl calls out to the detective again. A knight in armor. The woman says the men are ordinary, but the girl is very beautiful. The woman explains that when the binding is complete, the girl will serve his majesty. He shouts at them not to touch the girl. The girl says this. The woman says there's nothing to be afraid of. He's a kind and gentle man who will definitely treat her well, at least until he tires of his new toy. The woman casts a spell, addressing Menios, the god of light, and commands that his soul be bound by an ancient contract. The girl is horrified. The woman says she can't let this happen. The boy covers his mouth with his hands in horror. Ryouma says he won't let it happen. The man with the sword strikes the woman. A woman screams in pain. A man warns her not to touch his daughter with dirty hands. The man asks Asuka if she's okay. Asuka barely manages to utter a sound of displeasure and calls the man grandfather. A man in a kimono stands before a group of armored knights. The knight reports that the enemy's body is completely exposed. The man explains that this resembles the symbol of the kingdom of Verzibia, and that they should be grateful it's not El Nestra or the cult of the god of light. The girl says she can't believe it and that her grandfather just killed them, noting that the man says he should have cast a spell instead of talking, and calls the other an idiot. The guy shouts that he'll make the other cut him up and feed him to the pigs. The man is outraged that a pawn from another world dared to cut off his right hand, calling it unforgettable. The man says it's a front triangle choke and that it's not bad. He explains that it's Nanati Judo, now called Kasen Judo, but warns that you can't choke someone in full armor. The man turns to Asuka and says he knows. The man with the sword explains that this isn't Japan or their homeland. The man with the tail explains that they were probably summoned by a woman and says they may not understand now, but they will soon. The man in the suit is confused, not understanding what's being said, and asks why they are also. The boy screams about what's going on, and the man asks Kasuda to calm down. The boy turns to Tachibana and says this is their top priority, and the man explains that he doesn't like this situation either, but they need to get out of here. The man says that if there's a place to escape to, they'll leave the country. The girl asks what they should do, whether they should go back. The man tells Asiuka to take Uka with her and explains that the katana is a pair with this Kikuka, and even if they are separated, they will still be drawn to each other. The man orders her to leave it to him and leave the castle immediately, promising to catch up with them. The boy says they'll just hold him back and says he wants to hear more about it later. The man asks her to go out and catch up with them, warning them it's best to get out alive. The man explains he trusts Asuka. The man yells for her to go. The girl says they intend to survive at any cost. The man thanks him for coming and welcomes Baron Mikoshiba with open arms. The man expresses deep appreciation for the warm welcome during his surprise visit and hopes to begin a relationship from today. Ryouma addresses the man as Lord Salzburg. The man explains that, especially after entering the Vortinia Peninsula, there are no towns or villages, and Ryouma will have to import supplies from Ippolos until he gets settled in. The man says that now that they are neighbors, he wants to get to know Ryouma and strengthen their relationship in the future. Ryouma is grateful. The man explains that while waiting for Baron Mikoshiba, he ordered his chef to prepare only the finest dishes. Ryouma says this is quite impressive for a man of humble origins like himself. The man asks him to stop being modest and explains that he has heard that Ryouma is highly trusted by the king. The girl pours a drink and says she's serving it to the gentleman. The man thanks her. The man, with his glass, raises a toast to the glory of their family and Mikoshibadano, after which the three clink glasses. The man sits on the bed in silence. The man reflects on the couple, noting that. The man reports that Lord Mikoshiba has a better cook than the capital and has supplies that are possibly exclusive to his land. Ryouma ponders the salt and thinks it's worth checking. At that moment, someone knocks on the door and asks permission to enter. The woman says that she can no longer hide her feelings and wants to be with him. He looks at her silently. There are no speech bubbles or text in the image, so there is no retelling. The man says he was following that maid. The man says that the person to whom the girl was given is not worth it and asks why she was given to such an impudent man. The woman explains that the man has many other maids to choose from, whom he discards after having fun with them. The man angrily declares that he is the one who controls his own and does not. Ryouma says he doesn't need it and asks if it will be a problem for the girl if he says so. The girl answers affirmatively. The woman explains that this is her first time and asks to be allowed to do this, promising to try hard for the master. He trembles and thinks that if he lets her go, she will be expelled from the house, and that she was forced to this state. The man says that this lady, despite her appearance. The girl says she can't believe Ryouma smiled. Ryouma explains that he's smiling. The man says to stay here for the night. The man asks what's wrong with that expression. Ryouma makes a sound of displeasure. The man with the horse says the work isn't finished until you get home, and reminds you not to forget to say goodbye, urging you to smile. He announces that he's leaving. The man replies that it's very good. The man with long hair says that with his help, this land can be developed peacefully, addressing. The boy says they couldn't help but ask him, since he's probably connected to the lords, and asks them to wait, explaining that this is good for now. The man says that in a few days he'll try to relieve them of responsibility, since the peninsula won't be able to develop without them, and adds that. The man says he'll have to report back about the wonderful welcome party, especially last night, but then makes a joke. The man calls the other man boss. The man explains he's joking and won't say anything, especially to the girls. Ryouma says that's cruel and the man warns that. He explains that if he can't win, he won't be able to continue. He says he doesn't want to give up and intends to fight to the end. The guy says yes. The man asks if it's hard to forget about his world, and Ryouma remains silent. The man explains that he doesn't understand what it means to have a place to return to, but he understands that there is no home. Ryouma says he needs to accept this fact and that he already knows it in his head. The man explains that Ryouma is a stranger. The speaker reports that the wheels are turning and confirms this with the word yes. The girl says that now everything is in her hands. The guy asks what he has at the trading companies. The girls, Laura and Sarah, answer in the affirmative. The guy calls them by name. The woman explains that most of the trading companies in Ippolos have close ties to Count Salzburg, the city's ruler, and are all very close to him. She reports that of all these companies, the 10 largest have formed an alliance that completely controls Ippolos' economy. The woman explains that the reason for this is. The man explains that they became leaders of the alliance by offering their daughter to a nobleman, and the girl explains that it's surprising that the nobleman agreed to marry the merchant's daughter. The man explains that rumors circulated about Count Salzburg's financial difficulties, so they offered investments to win his favor. The old man reports that there was no salt mine in the Count's territory. Ryouma asks what this means and explains that the Count indicated he had reliable access to salt. The girl suggests that perhaps the Count has access to a salt mine outside his territory. The woman suggests that it might be on. He says that's exactly it. The man explains that the Count owns a salt mine on the peninsula, which he's been hiding from the kingdom. He says he's impressed by how quickly everyone figured it out. The woman says she's actually impressed by the Count's level of greed. The girl explains that even. Ryouma says it's no wonder they're treating him so well, since they want to send them to the peninsula in a good mood so they won't notice, and adds that it's surprising the mine ended up in such a strange place. The girl explains that from Vortinia's perspective, the mine is on the dark side of the mountains, and the old man asks why Sarah is against the idea, and she explains that if their ultimate goal is to develop the peninsula, then Ippolos must not fall under any circumstances, as the queen is watching them and will most likely install someone loyal to her court in Ippolos. The girl adds. The woman suggests pretending to be softened by the Count's hospitality, so he'll lower his guard, and announces that, as a token of gratitude, they'll give him the rights to the mine in exchange for help with development, and use the proceeds to improve their holdings. The woman explains that this will take time, but they can wait. Simone Christophe announces that she is the temporary leader of the Christophe Trading Company and expresses her honor to serve Ryouma. She explains that the Mr. Trading Company has isolated and persecuted them. Ryouma notices that Simone resembles a lily, but her scent conceals danger, and he realizes. The woman reports that a man named Mikoshiba Ryouma registered with the guild 8 months ago and asks the Baron if there's a problem. The man asks what it's all about. The woman explains that they checked his background before he became Lord of the Worth Peninsula. The woman explains that it's strange when an opportunity for education is presented incorrectly, and says that it's the wisdom that led Princess Lupis to victory that's important. The woman says that the interlocutor is likely from another world, summoned here by Orthomore. The woman clarifies that the interlocutor is from another world, summoned. The woman explains that she understands the Baron's request and suggests moving on to business matters. Ryouma says that he now understands her purpose and would be grateful for her enthusiastic assistance. Ryouma tries the tea and says it's delicious. The woman asks how he knows, to which he replies that he's had many. He says they choose such a long route because of the Vortinia Peninsula. The woman explains that this is natural, since there are no inhabitants and no port there. He reports that the northern route is avoided by sailors, and besides, pirates occupy the palace. He explains that if they build and develop. Ryouma explains that the Trade Association, which has cooperative relationships with other countries and uses pigeons to exchange information, has a significant network to be reckoned with, despite its decline. The girl adds that the network is truly impressive. An older man reports that defecting to the enemy was problematic. The woman explains that giving people land to work and collecting taxes is the essence of nation building. She says that people are a country's greatest asset, and that the empire and other countries can encourage migration as if they were taking over a lord's property. The woman explains that the job of politicians is. The boy says they can be purchased with the promise of freedom after the purchase. The woman asks if this means they are not going to enter into a master-slave contract. The girl explains that both she and her sister are military slaves, and that ever since Ryu-sama freed them, they have dedicated themselves. The man says that Lara and Sarah have sworn allegiance to him. The girl asks if it's because he saved them from a slave trader. The man explains that no one is responding, and that's natural. The girls say that, of course, they like their master. The man says that's their answer. The boy says he hates the slave system, which ignores human will and oppresses people, and that even the status system is wrong. He explains that he's a baron, but he doesn't care, and if he can save people and make a difference, that will be good. The girl explains that in Vortinia, slaves don't count. The man explains that they, Abdul, are the largest slave traders in Ipparos and offer a wide selection of military and labor slaves, promising to find a slave that suits their needs. Ryouma says she wants slaves in large quantities, and the man asks if he's sure, explaining that they don't have any military slaves. The man asks them to wait a minute. He says that if the store can't provide what he wants, they'll go somewhere else and suggests they go home. The man invites them in, explains that this is their warehouse, asks them to look around, and says that there's no other store with as wide a selection as theirs. The boy urges them to hurry. The man asks if Tachibana is okay. The man reports that Tachibana's bleeding is increasing. The girl says they need to treat him. The boy calls for Kiryu. The man asks how much time has passed since then. The girl suggests they at least rest for a little while, explaining that more. The boy says he'll take his wand with him and asks her to pass this on to Tachibana. The man notices Sakura calling and addresses her. The woman explains that Sakura started calling suddenly. The man asks what happened, and the woman replies that Sakura started calling suddenly. The girl explains to the man that if he can't control his fear, he will die, and tells him that a monster is about to appear. The man and girl watch the creature appear in the forest. The girl, the man, and another boy stand together and look ahead. Ryouma stands and looks ahead. The man explains that aristocrats may consider killing slaves, but he doesn't recommend it, as children take time to grow up and their productivity is low. He adds that trash only breeds more trash, and if slaves are unusable, it's best to discard them and replace them with new ones. As this. The man asks for forgiveness if he's offended anyone and apologizes. Ryouma says that's enough and orders him to raise his head. The man asks how much he needs to pay, offering 150 gold coins, to which Ryouma replies that it's 50,000 yen per head, and says it's done. The girl says she was angry too. The man says he has wrinkles between his eyebrows. He says, "Hey!" The girl says she remembers the first time she met him. Ryouma explains that he was very worried back then and thought he was helping someone out of selfish gratification, but he knew that as a fugitive he shouldn't have saved them both, yet he did it anyway. Ryouma then explains that the situation has changed now. He says he can't afford to die here and says that if he dies, he won't be able to see his dream come true. Ryouma says it's within reach and that he doesn't care what happens to it. He says he'll save it. Then they show a tiger with 3 eyes, and Ryouma explains that it has 3 eyes and that he doesn't like it. The woman says that Kiryu-san must run. The man says that something strange is happening. Ryouma says he's tired. The man says, "Oh my God," and calls Tachibana-san. A girl asks how a flower crown suits her. The woman explains that it's beautiful, but expensive and not suitable for everyday wear. The woman says the guy with the crown is weird, but that's normal for this time of year. The girl replies that she's afraid of being alone forever. The woman denies this. A woman reports something strange happening. A man explains that they need to hide in the forest. The girl explains that she was in the forest and then says it's Sakura. The girl asks why she's naked, and the other girl says she has pants and thanks her. The girl says she doesn't remember how long it's been since they were safe, and says she needs to be brave. The man replies, Ryouma looks at the camp with its tents. The man thanks the young boss and says he'll do whatever he asks, asking him not to feel sorry for himself. The woman explains that since she's prepared more than she said before, she wants more. The man asks if he understood correctly that she wants more. He says okay, if that's the case, she has a deal and asks her to just sign here. The man says okay if she signs here. The man says that now that the job is done, he hopes for continued patronage of his shop. Ryouma says that the prepared clothes need to be distributed to everyone and that the chains and ropes need to be broken. The woman explains that everyone should line up, and she plans to distribute the clothes to everyone. Ryouma refuses. He asks what she means, and the girl explains that this is what they wanted. The man in chains explains that slavery is structured in such a way that they are only allowed to do anything after a clear order from the master. The girl says that perhaps those girls thought they could take off their clothes or wash them at their own discretion. The girl says her clothes are new, but there's still dirt on her body. Ryouma explains that this is a stupid question and that one should understand the girl's heart. Ryouma informs them that they have to walk a little further and asks them to be patient, understanding that everyone is hungry. The girl thinks she won't be able to walk any further. The girl asks if she can play, to which the woman replies that it's normal. The woman says the owner said it was normal, so that's how it is. The man explains that she should just enjoy herself and wash all the dirt off her body, then adds that if she does this, she'll look better in new clothes. The girl says. The woman says the soup is hot, so she should wait and eat it slowly. The man explains that they've always only had black bread, but now they have white bread and soup, and not to worry because they can get more. The girl says the food is delicious. The woman says the soup is warm. The man says that when they came here, he knew it would be dangerous, and he also knew it would happen one day. The girl says she was afraid when she came here today, but she came anyway. The girl explains that she was scared, but the man says he was right there with her. The girl. The text thanks Goof 1111 for the font types, redrawing and help, and KediGRP for reworking Chapter 29. It's reported that this is their first time doing this, and they were helped by reader comments on improvements. It's also reported that many people offered to help, but due to the study, the girl says a dragon is flying towards them. The man says he's never seen anything like it. A group of people in the water notice the approaching dragon. The man says it looks like they have several servants and calls them lords. The woman says that's what he wanted to show and asks the man not to be rude in front of the servants. The man asks her to stop. The man explains that he apologizes to the lords and that The woman explains that this matter is appropriate to discuss with Her Majesty and asks why Ryouma is approaching them about this. Ryouma explains that he wants to transfer the rights to the salt deposits located in his territory and asks them to review the contract. The man asks what he has in mind. Ryouma says. A man approaches him, asking if he's come to take a look around. He replies that it's something like this. The man explains that starting tomorrow, the children's skills will be tested to the limit and asks if he thinks they can handle it. He reports that everything looks. The man announces that the Lord will personally hand out candies today and suggests they line up, promising those who have been especially good will receive 3 candies, and the laziest will have a rest next time. Ryouma suggests to Mike that maybe they should give each person 2 candies, to which the man replies that without. He says he can't understand why his body isn't recovering and explains that his powers aren't working as they usually do. The man explains that his body isn't responding to treatment and says it might be related to his condition. He says he feels weak and can't use his abilities. The man explains. The girl says they'll be back soon and calls the guy too charming. The guy responds with a question. The man then says the commander won't have to use magic anymore, and the guy agrees, calling him a real monster. The man explains that once the magic is obtained, all they'll have to do is use. The man on horseback tells them to move forward and prepare for an attack, and the warriors shout hurrah and report that the enemy will not be able to advance according to Nautilus's plan. The man explains that instead of attacking the front, the enemy is trying to outflank. The woman explains that the enemy army consists of. The boy says it's time, the man says it's necessary. The man explains that the cavalry is starting to retreat. General Solvale says they shouldn't let them attack. The man says that if they let the enemy break through, all will be lost. General Solvale says he can't allow it. Ryouma says he can't afford to lose and will fight to the end. The man explains that the situation is difficult, but he must try. Ryouma explains that he has a plan and is confident in his abilities. The man says he will support him and be by his side. Ryouma says that now is the best time. It is reported that all the inhabitants of Zaruta are mourning the hero general, and as a result, the situation in the east has calmed down. It is explained that 17,000 succubus knights perished on the battlefield with him, forcing Altormia to retreat. This is said to have caused a temporary. Ryouma says he can't believe he's been summoned to such a place and asks what's going on. The woman explains that the place is called Waltheria, and that it's where trials for those who want to become knights take place. Ryouma explains that he came here to prove his strength. The woman explains that. He says he's sorry for saying too much and that he needs to calm down a bit. He then turns to a girl named Melissa and explains that Hannah has always been lucky and is probably living a carefree life in some city. At least he hopes so. Melissa. The boy explains that he was lonely and therefore took responsibility, asking her not to blame himself. The girl says there's no need to say that and then asks if the boy hates Master Mikoshiba because of how things turned out. The boy indignantly asks why she thinks that. Ryouma reports that Volturnian warriors are advancing on the capital and explains that their goal is to capture the city. The man explains that the enemy army outnumbers them, but they must hold out. The woman says they cannot allow the enemy to advance any further and urges everyone to be prepared for. He announces that he won't be fighting this time and explains that he wants to watch the fight. The man says that's a smart decision and explains that there are strong fighters involved. He says he wants to understand how they fight, and the man explains that this will help him in the future. The guy says that he will make everyone die until there is not a single one left. The woman says she was waiting for Ryouma. She explains that, according to her information, he dealt with the pirates without difficulty and congratulates him on it. Ryouma says that news always reaches him quickly. The woman calls him by his first name, Simone. He tells her that there are a lot of people in this town who don't want him here and that he can't stay here for long. The girl explains that she understands this and that she doesn't want him to get hurt either. He says that he came here to find answers and that he's not going to give up. The woman says she's never forgotten anything and explains that elves and humans once lived together. The man explains that about 400 years ago, 2 humans from the underworld appeared in the land of Amerigar, and that the native population was poisoned by their selective methods, fungal wheels with. A man reports that someone smells just like him, which is quite a high rating. The woman explains that Yoshio is a term for bad guys. The man says that at least he's not looked down on, but it could be a trap. The man explains that to find out.